So I'll call to order the meeting of the Common Council for Monday, December 7th, 2009, and ask you all to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Knudsen?
Here.
District 1 Morset?
Here.
District 2 Brokaw?
Here.
District 3 Bernard?
Here.
District 4 Wyland?
Here.
District 5 O'Malley?
Here.
District 6 Burchell?
Here.
Okay, we're all here. This is the time when we take comments and suggestions from citizens present on any item that's not listed on the council meeting agenda, but would pertain to an issue that might have an impact on the city of Hudson or might be an item for a future agenda. Is there anyone here who would like to address the council tonight on any issue? Anybody here for anything other than an item that's on the agenda tonight? Would like to make any comments to the council? If not, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Would you read those items, please?
To approve the public hearing and regular meeting minutes of November 16th, 2009. To approve claims for payment in the amount of $424,335.83. A detailed description is available in the clerk's office on request and on the city's website. To approve the renewal and issuance of secondhand jewelry dealer licenses to Robert Madsen doing business as Elizabeth's Fine Jewelry at 2117 Cooley Road, and Roy and Julie Leak doing business as J.R. Haberek Jewelers at 210 Locust Street, and Cindy Saradsky doing business as Harlan's Haven at 1810 Crestview Drive with a secondhand article dealer license for her. To approve the issuance of a secondhand article dealer license and secondhand jewelry dealer license to Daniel Erickson doing business as Fabulous Finds at 524 2nd Street, Hudson. To approve the appointment of election inspectors for the period January 1st, 2010 through December 31st, 2011, as submitted by the Democratic and Republican parties. Additional information is available in the clerk's office on request. To place on file the quarterly report of the Parks and Public Works Director and the unapproved minutes of the St. Croix EMS Commission of November 17th, 2009, and the unapproved Community Access Board minutes of December 1st, 2009. That is all.
Thank you.
Move for approval. Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda items. Roll call vote.
Morset?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Wyland?
Yes.
Burchell?
Yes.
Bernard?
Yes.
Brokaw?
Yes.
Vote 6-0, and the consent agenda items are approved. Next, we'll move on to an item from the Plan Commission, the final plat for Heritage Cottages subdivision, 4 one-family and 11 two-family residential lots and 2 outlots west of Heritage Boulevard, Heritage Greens planned residential development. The applicant is TV&H Properties, represented by Nick Hackworthy. And Denny Darnold's here.
Mr. Mayor, I'll recuse myself.
Okay. Mr. O'Malley is recused. Denny, you want to tell us about this?
This plat is part of the Heritage Greens planned residential development. It's generally located immediately west of the Heritage Cottages project. It was constructed by Gerard Companies. The intent of this plat is for Gerard's to buy lots 1 through 11, and 12 through 15 will be retained under the ownership of TV&H. The lot 1 through 11 are two-family residential lots. There will be two-family residences constructed on those, which will be rented for elderly persons of generally low income. I think it's a very good project. During the last month, because the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Corporation administration, is involved in this. There were some tax credit funds to move this project ahead. And apparently that WIDA and Gerard Corporation has now come to agreement on the funding of this particular portion for lots 1 through 11. committee recommendation is for the Plan Commission recommends approval of the final plat for Heritage Cottages as proposed by TV&H Properties for the following, with the following conditions: provision of drainage easements for lots 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, and a portion of outlot 2 to be incorporated into lot 12. Also, if the plat is requested to be filed prior to the installation and acceptance of the proposed street and utility improvements, the development agreement be executed in a provision for surety of 125% of the estimated cost of the improvements be provided prior to the execution of the plat by the City Council. This is a typical development agreement that we require to provide a surety for the construction of the public easements, public improvements. I just want to ask that the provision for drainage easements for 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, Chuck and I have been working with Gerard Corporation. The grading plan has changed substantially. We feel that the grading plan is a good grading plan, but our preference would be is to have a blanket drainage easement over those lots, because the lots will be under one management. And we'd like to get one overall drainage blanket easement over those particular lots, and also have a maintenance, irrigation maintenance and irrigation stormwater agreement with them, that if in the long-term future these lots are sold individually, that whoever buys those lots will have some understanding that there's been a joint agreement, and that could be renegotiated at that time. So we would like to just encourage you to change the provision for drainage easements on 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11 to a general blanket easement over lots 1 through 11, and then also provide for the provision of a stormwater agreement and irrigation system agreement.
I'll move for approval on the committee recommendation as cited, plus the added blanket drain easement 1 through 11, and then the stormwater agreement and irrigation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Chuck Schwartz is here tonight to explain anything on those easements as far as if there's any particular questions, and I think Nick Hackworthy is here tonight, and also Paul Gerard from Gerard Corporation is here if you have any particular questions of them.
So is the blanket easement acceptable to them? And will that work
Yes.
that way?
He's answering yes.
Okay. Chuck, you have anything to add?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Gerard, if you're going to speak, I'm going to have you come over here.
I just want to say thank you to the ladies and gentlemen of the City Council and the Mayor and Denny for all the hard work. I think Denny said it himself the best. I just wanted to add that we'll be entering into a 60-year land use restriction agreement on this property. So for future use for those to be sold off as single families in the immediate future is highly unlikely. But we'll work with the city, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to again say thank you, and we're looking forward to another great project up here, and with a lot of help from TV&H to push this project forward. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? Ready to vote on this? Scott's recused. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And motion carries, and the final plat is approved. Next is item number 2, a conditional use permit by Westlake Builders Incorporated, Richard Grekoff, for a 64-unit assisted living and memory care housing project at 653, 655, 657, and 661 Banterra Lane, part of Section 32, T29N R19W in the town of Hudson, from the Extraterritorial Zoning Committee. Denny?
As the mayor alluded, the recommendation comes from the Extraterritorial Zoning Committee. There was a public hearing held last Monday, November 30th, in regards to this. And I believe there are some people in the audience tonight that attended that public hearing, so they may want to speak in regards to any of the issues in regards to this particular proposal. The Extraterritorial Zoning Committee recommends the approval of the conditional use permit for a 64-unit assisted living and memory care housing project at 653, 655, 657, 661 Banterra Lane, part of Section 32, Town 29 North, Range 19 West, Town of Hudson, with the following conditions. There's about 10 conditions that have been recommended. Require a residential care apartment complex, Chapter Department of Housing, Health Services 89, and community-based residential facility, Department Health Services 83, licenses from the Wisconsin Department of Health Services to be obtained and maintained. Copies of the licenses will be provided to the Town of Hudson and the City of Hudson. Require the review of the conditional use permit by the Town of Hudson, City of Hudson, 1 year after the occupancy permit is issued. Require a stormwater pollution prevention plan approved by the Town of Hudson, City of Hudson. Require a stormwater management agreement approved by the Town of Hudson. Recommendations were provided 8/29/09 by Tamara Whitmer, St. Croix County Urban Land Specialist. Require stormwater easement with the City of Hudson to discharge into the city system. Require an access agreement with the City of Hudson because there's a easement on the west side of this property that is in part over the city property. Require a septic permit required by the county and state approval, including a pretreatment system to be issued prior to start of construction and on-site grading. Purpose of that condition is the septic permit cannot be issued. We don't want the grading on the site to start and be disrupted if the permit is not issued. Require a plan for the disposal of pharmaceuticals be provided to the Town of Hudson and the City of Hudson. This plan should be reviewed on an annual basis and may be revised as federal, state, and local standards are established for pharmaceutical disposal. Require inspection and pumping of the septic system on an annual basis or lesser time or lesser period if required by the county and state septic permits. Those are the recommended conditions of the recommendation for approval of the conditional use permit. There were some issues. Basically, the general comments from the public has been that this project seems to be in favor of by the general public. However, the issue of the disposal of pharmaceuticals, how those traces of pharmaceuticals may reach the groundwater through a septic system. Also, where this proposed development may be hooked on to municipal sanitary sewer and water has been in question, and maybe some of the people in the audience, including Mr. Grekoff, may wish to address some of those particular issues.
Go ahead.
I'd like to move, and I'll explain why if there's a second. I'd like to move to postpone this request at this point.
I'll second it.
Is that an unlimited postponement, or do you have a particular date in mind? I mean, can I just clarify there?
Yeah, it's a particular date, if you let me.
Okay.
So the more, yeah.
Well, why don't you, because I think that's going to be a question for everyone, or maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth. I guess you made the motion to postpone, which is a motion, and you've got a second. Is the motion to postpone debatable?
I want to have discussion on it, is my point. I don't want to just,
Postpone consideration, no interruption permitted. I already did that, sorry. And it is debatable, and it is amendable. Sorry, Randy. All right, any discussion on his motion?
well, I'll start by saying that I've been opposed to this project for, since its inception, for one reason alone. And it's been because it's not being hooked up to our water sewer system for the environmental issues on pharmaceutical and the infiltration of that potentially happening up there. I support the project. It's good for Hudson and the surrounding community as a whole. It'll bring in jobs. It'll bring in a lot of different tax base. It's just good. But I'm not going to support it if it's going to be on its own septic system. We adopted Resolution 409 on sustainable environmental issues, I think in October, maybe even further back. You know, and we need to make the effort to move Hudson toward more environmentally sound practices. I'm not gonna get on that whole topic right now, but we need, I should say, and specifically in the resolution, we adopted to reduce our contribution to the buildup of synthetic substances in our environment. So it would be hypocritical if we decided to pass it without doing some, I guess, more due diligence. I guess my real motion of postponement is based on the fact that I'd like to see City Planner Darnold and Mr. Grecoff and Westlake sit down and work on an agreement where we could possibly have them hooked up to our water and sewer. I'm not opposed to the project, I'm opposed to the septic system of the project.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment on the motion? Scott?
I have a question. This is a request for a conditional use permit by the builder/developer of Westlake. Is Mr. Grecoff here this evening? I have a question for you, sir. Who is going to operate this facility?
Dick, why don't you come up here to the podium if you would? That way you'll have the microphone and everyone at home will be able to see you and all of that.
Good evening. The actual care management company is a company called Tealwood Care Centers. They run probably 35 projects like this throughout Minnesota, limited amount here in Wisconsin. I think there's only 1 or 2 in Wisconsin, but Iowa and the Dakotas. So they are very well experienced and so on in the operation of these care centers.
Thank you. The reason I bring it up is that I share Randy's concerns. And I'm kind of surprised, I guess. What I would have expected to have seen is someone from that organization to be standing next to you and explaining to us what they're going to do to account for the pharmaceuticals. They don't have to be flushed. They can be accounted for in other ways. And until we see such a plan, I don't see moving forward on this at all. So perhaps you might talk to them about what they plan to do rather than take kind of what I can only interpret as kind of a cavalier attitude that thinking that maybe this will just slide through and they don't have to actually tell us what they plan to do with those pharmaceuticals. I'd like to know what they plan to do. So they should be here alongside of you telling us what their plan is to eradicate this problem before it begins.
Well, let me interrupt you a little bit because I think there was a question in that. I'm going to reinterpret it, but I mean, you're making some comments.
At your peril, sir.
At my peril. But since we brought him up to the microphone, I mean, can you address the question that is there is, what about the pharmaceuticals? How will they be handled?
Okay, quite the contrary to this, and we've addressed this question and answered this on numerous occasions through the township and all of the public hearings as well as the extraterritorial meetings that we've had here. Any pharmaceuticals are handled in other words, okay, just like you would do in the hospital, in a doctor's office, syringes, pharmaceuticals, any kind of drugs are not flushed. They're put into a hazardous container kind of thing. That is standard practice, and that is the kind of a requirement that is required by the licensing boards and so like that of the state of Wisconsin. Just to the contrary to that, individual citizens in the city normally are told, as a rule, to get rid of drugs, don't store them in your medicine cabinets like that. Flush them down the toilet. That's the standard answer for getting rid of drugs in a typical city setting with your public sewer system. That goes into the public system. It goes from there. It is, the drugs are not in any fashion separated from the normal sewage system. They go from there into the St. Croix River. The solids get spread on the out in the fields of around this city, out in the township. We aren't doing anything different. In fact, we are supervising through a very detailed management program of the sewer system that is part of our whole proposal as to how the sewage system is constructed, how it is, by way of the state licensing and design requirements. And it is constantly monitored and maintained on an ongoing basis for throughout the duration of its use. The frequency of this, it is all of the effluents are tested. They start the testing within 45 days of occupancy of the thing, and then they are, until it gets up to full occupancy, there is continuing tests every 4 to 6 days intervals until the effluents are until the buildings is fully occupied and it is stabilized. So all these tests are continually taken. After that period of time, after everything is stabilized, it goes from there into a 3-month plan for the first year. By that I mean a testing procedure, and then after that, 6-month testing procedure from there on. And then all these results of all these tests as part of the conditions that were put on this from the extraterritorial committee were that all of these test results go to the state, the county, and both the township and the city here for review. And there's nothing being slid under the carpet by anybody. We have been very, very outgoing and explicit as to how this stuff is being handled. It is not by any means an inferior system by any means. I think because of this frequent testing program, you probably will find our reaction time to any problem is probably faster than what the city has in their own system. They might test something every 6 months. We're doing this thing much more often than that, and can react to this. And keep in mind, we have a total of 64 people in this building, not 10,000 or however many people that live in the city of Hudson.
May I ask a question?
Okay, yes.
Could I just ask a question about the testing that's done, and what specifically are they testing for? Is it similar to testing that's done at our water treatment facility, or?
Excuse me, Dick.
Well, I believe the issue that's been raised is where pharmaceuticals may potentially contaminate the groundwater. City of Hudson does not test for pharmaceuticals, either at a wastewater treatment plant nor at our water treatment facility, or do we monitor pharmaceuticals in our water system as we pump water before it's treated. We don't test for any of those. There's no requirement at the state level. I'm not knowledgeable of any requirement for private septic systems to test for specific pharmaceuticals either.
You're answering my question. So the testing that's being done is not specifically for pharmaceuticals, it's for something else.
Well,
I just want to know what the test is for.
Required by law.
we could have had our wastewater director here, but, so I'll go out on a limb for you. But whether it's a private system or our city system, I can speak more to the city system because we get the report, and so we all see it from time to time. I'll dredge up from my memory. But we're testing for coliform bacteria, for example, and we don't want to be putting anything out of the plant that would be a health hazard, where someone's going to get sick from bacteria, for example, that are left in there. So it's got to come to a certain point. It doesn't mean it's drinking water point, but it's got to come to a certain point so that when it goes out of the treatment plant, it's at that acceptable level. For the city, we treat for phosphorus, and then we measure what goes out in the phosphorus, because that's one of the big issues for the protection of the entire scenic St. Croix Riverway, and that's something that I'm not aware of any private system that tests for phosphorus. So to say that there's more testing, more frequent testing, and better testing than the city system, I have to bristle a little bit at that, because I don't think so, actually. We test for things like mercury and other heavy metals in the city system. I don't honestly know whether that would be required of the private system or not. But I think this is a complex question. It's one of concern for the groundwater. It's also one of multiple municipal jurisdictions, in this case the town of Hudson and ourselves, and trying to make good government decisions in a cooperative, collaborative manner. That's sometimes harder than you think. Sometimes there's tax base at stake. Sometimes there's issues of control and so on. For the most part, we would not allow commercial development to happen right outside of city limits without wanting to have a lot to say in it. In fact, a lot of commercial development, if it was of a certain density, we would just say no. And the fact is, when this project first came up and they talked to the city about annexing, the policy of the city at that time was, well, we aren't going to annex anymore for residential. We'll talk about annexing for other purposes, but we're not going to annex for residential. And they ultimately started talking with the town of Hudson, where a project of this size and a private septic system of this size is actually a pretty unusual thing in the town of Hudson as well. And the town of Hudson went through some process to get to this where it is. Now, I think the issue, as I understand it, it comes down to a matter of overall groundwater safety. And is there a reason for us to say no to this use because it's not on city water and sewer? We already talked about this use once before, and we said in the zoning issue, you know what, this use at that location probably would be okay. Does it fit with the needs of the city? Probably does. Does that location fit with the needs of the city? Probably does. That was blind to the question of whose septic is going to be on. And then you should also all be aware, as I'm sure you already are, is we don't have any annexation control as a city in Wisconsin. And we can say no, but we can't say, here, this is going to be annexed. We always respond to requests from the landowner who has land outside of the city and wants to come in. Why would they ever want to do that? Well, a lot of times they want to do something with the land that they aren't going to be able to do without annexation. And so here you are. If you want to say yes to this project on a private sewer, you say yes to this conditional use permit. If you want to say no to this project on a private sewer, you're going to have to say no to this conditional use permit. That doesn't force them into annexation. It might force them into doing something different. But if we don't grant this conditional use permit, they're not going to be able to develop it with the private septic. I don't recommend, and I don't think we should go down the line of beginning to extend city water and sewer services to land that is not annexed. So as much as it's tough to sit here and make a decision yes and no, and it's a lot easier to say, well, maybe, I can tell you that that's a difficult thing. We've dealt with it before and similar. You can take like Faith Community Church was one. All they wanted was to be on city water so they wouldn't have to do fire suppression through other means. And they're right across the street from city water. But our answer has been no, we aren't going to provide those services outside of city limits unless you annex. So that's, go ahead.
Well, that's kind of why I left the motion open the way it was. To sit down with Denny and Mr. Grecoff and Westlake, maybe work something out. I'm not suggesting anything,
but there's an opportunity. But I'm also willing to pull the motion and then move to deny if that's the road you
Well,
want to
you've
go.
got a
But
motion on the table. I think you're the only one that can pull it.
Well, right.
Lee?
I have one question. We talked about the pharmaceutical management program. In the hospitals, as you put out pharmaceuticals, they are accounted for. They're accounted for going out, they're accounted for coming back, they're accounted for when they're disposed of. Can you tell us, what is your pharmaceutical management program in this facility?
Exactly the way you described in a hospital. If they are, they're administered by a nurse. We've got a full-time registered nurse on staff that will administer any kind of medicine and drugs. These are handled in that exact same fashion as you're talking about. There aren't drugs just sitting around. So they have to be handled in that same fashion.
So then the question I have is, our concern is not things getting flushed down the toilet, which is kind of where this whole discussion started, right?
Well, Scott wanted to speak.
Just a quick comment. Mr. Grecoff, you're being very eloquent, but the fact remains this gentleman is not going to be running this facility. His company is not going to be running this facility. He can say whatever he pleases this evening. He is not responsible for what happens after he builds these buildings. He explained to us himself, did you not, that some other company will be running this facility?
Correct, but will you look at the conditions that are part of this thing, and it very specifically says there will be a pharmaceutical management program that is approved by the city, the township, the state, the licensing people, and so on. It is part of this whole program.
Can I
Go ahead.
indulge me
Go
for a
ahead.
minute?
Sure.
Because I don't know if we're going to have the public speak, but I've listened to comments from those concerned about the pharmaceuticals enough that I'll offer you this clarification. It isn't excess and waste drugs being flushed down as a means of disposal that's as much the concern. It's the fact that of drugs that are taken, typically orally taken, and they're excreted from the body in the waste stream that we're talking about being treated by wastewater. And that is actually the concern of the public over this, is that you've got 62 units. I don't know how many senior citizens are living in those 62 units, but I presume it's 62 or more, and that in any given month, there's a lot of pharmaceuticals going into this one source point into the groundwater there. And the difference between that and a city treatment system is that, of course, we aggregate everything all together. So you've got a stream coming from entire neighborhoods, from entire city by the time it gets down to the plant. And so there's kind of a dilution. The 62 is no longer concentrated in one point. It's diluted, commingled, no different treatment, because there is no treatment. And ours goes out into the St. Croix River, and when it gets clean enough, it goes down the river, which is further dilution. So my understanding of those concerns from the public is that is the advantage, that for hospitals, nursing homes, and other facilities of this type where you've got concentrated high numbers of people that are typically there and most often on medications, that this is a concern. It's for you to decide whether you've got enough information to make that decision tonight, or whether we need to postpone and find another way to address that. Some conditions were proposed by the extraterritorial committee in their recommendation to you, but you can add your own conditions, or you can reject it and say that even with the conditions that they recommended, that you don't feel that it meets the safety standard, if that's what it's about for you. I mean, there may be other reasons for you to vote, but I think that's become a key issue. Randy?
One more point. Under the in-ground dispersal cell management plan by the Commerce Department of Wisconsin, it does say in black and white that the sewage effluent generated at this site may exceed the highest strength effluent concentration levels that is measurable with the Department of Commerce standards. And with that, I will withdraw my motion to postpone, and then I will move to deny.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Morissette's withdrawn his motion to postpone, has offered a motion to deny, and was there a second?
I did.
By Mr. O'Malley. So the motion now is to deny the conditional use permit application. Any discussion? Lori, were you wanting to speak before? You get to be first.
Okay. I guess I would just add that I'm in support of the project. I'm uneasy with the idea of this going into a septic system, given the geography and composition of the soil. I'd like to see it move forward. I realize we can't require annexation, but I think, and I don't want to speak for the whole group, but I think there'd be general support if we knew that it were going to be on city sewer. That's all I have to say.
Anyone else?
Well, I think that it should be on city sewer, just for other reasons as well, so.
I support the project, but I agree with Lori and Lee. I would like to see it on the city septic system as opposed to a private system.
Mr. Mayor, may I say something
Just a second here.
as a landowner?
Yep. We'll let you speak
Okay,
before
thank
we vote here. Alan, did you have anything? Go ahead. Why don't you introduce yourself and give us your
My name is
and
Dick
address.
Stout, and I'm the owner of the land, and Dick made this offer to purchase almost 2.5 years ago now. And I've been on top of this thing the whole time because I've gone to all but, I think, one of the town board meetings, and the city and the extraterritorial. And the town of Hudson, their town board had the same concerns about the private sewer system. And Jim Thompson is the gentleman who designed the system that Dick proposes to use, and he has experience with the county for a long period of time. He's as versed in private septic systems as anybody, to my knowledge. I mean, I've asked a number of people. I've known Jim for a long time, and this is not a conventional residential private sewer system, as Jim explains it. And Jim did come to the town board meeting and had a great meeting with them. He came a couple times, but there was one where he talked for about 45 minutes on the advantages, actually, of this particular private system. And as he explained it, it's different from what is a resident has in the country, where they have a tank and a drain field. This system has a pre-treatment, he referred to it as a pre-treatment system, which treats the effluents before they get into the tank. And I wish he were here. He's a smart man, but he told me that what leaves the tank to go into the drain field is virtually drinkable. And he also explained to me and to the town board that this system is designed specifically for the purpose that it's being used for, as opposed to a city system or as opposed to a municipal system. It's designed specifically for this purpose. And after the town board heard this, they were convinced that it was a very viable way to take care of pharmaceuticals. And Jim not only is designing the system, he has to get it approved by the authorities, but he's also, I believe, Dick, at least as of last time I was talked about this, he was the man that was doing the monitoring for the township. And I believe it was also to the city that the extensive monitoring, and I don't know exactly, Dick probably has the timetable, but there was a significant amount of where he would come out and take tests, and what he is testing for, I believe, what he's testing for is pharmaceuticals, in addition to the conventional things that, Dick, am I?
That's correct.
Yeah, he is actually testing for what a facility like this may produce in concentrations. And so it's not like you're hooking it up to a conventional tank and drain field. It's a system that's designed by a guy who is really smart, who believes in it, who convinced the town board that it was a good way to go. And at the same time, he is the one that is monitoring it on a regular basis and reporting to the different bodies to make sure that it's being monitored. And if pharmaceuticals, as I understand it, if pharmaceuticals get above a certain level, then he can make adjustments in the system. And it's not a single system, it's a system with a backup. So if, I believe, unless something, so that if something goes haywire, there's a malfunction in the normal way it's processed, there is a backup system that will kick in until they're able to adjust the normal one. So when I was sitting back listening to this, it sounded like we were talking about a conventional residential septic system. And this is a long ways from a conventional system. It's extremely sophisticated, and Jim is a smart man. So I just wanted to.
Thank you. Any other member of the council got anything else to add?
Mr. Grecoff, have you applied for your permit? Have you received approval for the permit?
For the septic system?
Yes, from the state, or whoever gives the...
No, but the whole design thing is here and ready to be submitted as soon as we have to go ahead to do that. And he's the one that, Jim Thompson is the person that submits all of this to the state and the county.
Thank you.
Well, some of which Mr. Stout just said was news to me, and that this system is specifically designed to treat pharmaceuticals, and that there'd be specific testing for pharmaceuticals, and that if they were too high, that the system could be tweaked. And those were 3 data points that I never heard before. And it's possible that I could stand to get some more information on that. If all 3 of those are true, it's news to me. With that being said, my understanding of what's going on here is that we've got a motion to deny, and it is based on discomfort with having this large a private septic system this close to our city well, for example, which is approximately a half-mile away, or more generally speaking, the aquifer that feeds that city well.
That's correct, but I'm also including that it just goes contradictory of our resolution 4-09 we passed on sustainable.
All right, so I'm not trying to cut off debate, just the opposite. I want to ask you if you have anything else to say, and if you have a desire to hear from the members of the public that are here, which I haven't let come up except for Mr. Grecoff, Mr. Stout, if you want to, that can be up to the council. Is there a desire for that?
I know, I was surprised to hear some of this information too, and it bears, us hearing more information about that system. It's critical if they're testing specifically for pharmaceuticals and if they have a way of adjusting the effluent somehow. I would like to know what that's about. I don't know if there's a big hurry. I don't know if we could hear that at our next meeting and entertain public comment at that point. I think it's important to have all that information in front of us to hear the specifics of that system. Because right now, I think we are basing our ideas on the premise that it's a traditional septic. And we're uncomfortable, and rightfully so.
The reason I was somewhat surprised to hear that is it had been my understanding through just limited research over the past couple of weeks that really no system, private or public, was treating for pharmaceuticals in the United States, and really we're still relying on dilution and spreading and trying to avoid point concentration as the means right now. And I don't think whether it's Hudson, Wisconsin, or New York City, I'm not sure that that's happening. So I was surprised to hear that.
Mr. Mayor, Jim did make that point, that this is something that hasn't been a lot done, but
He's the landowner.
Yeah, he made that point in the opening that he was treating.
That it is something that can be adjusted, that it is, in his opinion, an excellent way to deal with it.
Mr. Mayor, if I may comment, we are
Yes.
hearing from people here of goodwill with good intentions. We're not hearing any expert testimony because we have no experts here. Without that, I don't think we can move forward on approving this. If we deny, they can always bring it back. And with a coherent plan, that's why I began by saying I was surprised we're not hearing from people who would know what they're talking about on this issue.
Danny?
Well, it just appears to me that the reasonable thing to do is postpone, allow Mr. Grecoff to come back with his expert testimony on the waste system and also answer some of the questions on the administrative considerations. At that point, make a decision.
Anyone else comments on the motion on the table, which is to deny the application?
I would support a
Postpone.
thank you instead of denial at this point.
Do you want to withdraw again? Sorry, it's not a funny matter, but I think we can see that we can't act on this tonight in an affirmative way. So let's find some way to make a decision in the future. Is that okay with you, Randy?
Yes and no, I'll withdraw for the purpose of you two to sit down and get this together. Next meeting or a month from now?
Whatever.
Whenever the-
As
They
seconder,
have
I'll
the information
concur.
gathered.
Well, if
I'm not
you've
gonna-
withdrawn your motion, then now anybody can make a new motion, which I take it there's a sense you want to postpone and have further expert
Pass
testimony.
back to Randy for his original motion.
I'll postpone it so these two can sit down and hash something out. But I don't want it prolonged. I want to get this done and off the table. 2.5 years he's waited. We need to make a decision. There's a lot of information in front of us, so I disagree with Lori's assessment.
Well, when I last,
We need to know what they're testing for.
So,
It's pretty critical. right?
Doesn't
all right,
matter,
so
we have a
you've made a
well.
motion to
I'll second.
postpone until Denny Darnold and Dick Reckoff can get together and talk about this more.
1 month.
Was that the motion?
1 month.
No, it was 1 month? 1 month. Well, we have 2 meetings scheduled in January. We have a special meeting scheduled December 21st, a regular meeting. Do you want to do it
First
on
meeting in
December
January?
21st? You want
First
to do
meeting
it?
in January.
Whenever they're ready.
Yeah.
Whenever
Whenever
they're
they're
ready.
ready.
Have the
Yeah.
information
I
gathered.
want a
I'm giving them
complete
time to
picture.
get the information you requested.
Yeah, a complete, whenever you guys can present a complete picture of what the septic system does and what it doesn't do. I want to know what its limitations are.
Can I add an advisory to that so that, some guidance for them? You're talking about us voting on the health of our constituents here in the city of Hudson. You're talking about effluent that could possibly reach the aquifer that would go into one of our city wells. So don't come back unless you feel you're really prepared, much more than tonight.
Well, that's for putting a time limit on that. It's gonna be tough. We'd like to make sure that you've got everything gathered before you come back to go along with what Scott's saying, that, and setting a time limit might be tough.
Why?
'Cause we'd like a complete package to review and not end like this where we'd like more information.
Motion.
Well, we're kind of getting to a motion. I think, is there a motion, Scott, or, pardon me, Randy?
Yeah, move to postpone for the first meeting in January.
Okay, is there a second? Is there a second to the motion to postpone till the first meeting in January? Third time, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, there's second. Any discussion?
With that, they have to come back to the first meeting of January, or they can come back the 21st of December.
I'm gonna put it on the agenda on the first meeting in January, if that's the motion, and we'll be back discussing it again then.
Well, if they feel they're not prepared, they can always come to us and say, you know what, thanks for putting this on the agenda, but we're not ready. And I don't want them coming back unless they're ready, because I don't want to go through this again.
Well, I agree with you there, and I said to Dick, I think in the public meeting when this came up back about 6 months ago, or whenever you were here, that while I had some misgivings, I was willing to go ahead with this to the next step because I hate to see a trap between two governments. First, we say, no, we won't annex you, or at least that was the information he got. It wasn't a formal application, but that was the information they got. So they go through the process with the town and they get it all to this point, and then we say no. And it's the worst example of intergovernment cooperation. That doesn't mean that because we've made one mistake, we have to keep on going down the road making mistakes. If you think this is a mistake to approve it, you shouldn't approve it. But we also don't want to drag it out. It'd be a lot cleaner for him to say, look, no, we don't think that that is going to happen. And then at least they know where they stand and they can make a decision about whether they still want to do this project or not. and what it's going to take to do it.
My argument is this. It sounds like they have the professional testimony. They don't have it here tonight, so we should give him the opportunity, if he's ready to come back at the next meeting. And if he can't present it, then we'll vote it down. If he's ready to present it, he can, so he has that flexibility. That's my only point.
Okay. Ready to vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No.
And we have one no from Lori. Was it 5 yeses? The motion carries. And we'll see you back in January. Okay, so we'll move on in our agenda to applications for operators licenses. We have a two-part motion or recommendation from the Finance Committee. The first part is to approve the 4 applications for regular operators licenses for the period from December 8th, tomorrow, until June 30th of 2011. Those are for Joseph Eck, Chadwick Moe, Patsy Peltier, and Randy Spring.
Mr. Mayor, recuse myself.
Mr. Morissette's recused. We have a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
And there's a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no, and those operators' licenses are approved. Second part to this is Finance Committee recommended denial of an application for an operator's license to Karis M. Steenberg, 359 Bear Drive in Hudson, as recommended by Police Chief Jensen, based on her history of alcohol-related violations within the past 3 years. You've got information in your packet, including a letter from the city attorney that was sent to Ms. Steenberg, and a letter from Ms. Steenberg. The recommendation from the Finance Committee was denial.
Move to deny.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to deny. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion is approved and that license is denied. Next, we've got item number 5, which is to consider ordering 2 Ford squad cars for the police department. Finance Committee recommended awarding this bid to Hudson Ford. After including the delivery charges, Hudson Ford had the lowest cost of the 3 bidders. What's your pleasure?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. That item is approved. Next, we've got number 6, the Finance Officer's Monthly Report. Eddie?
I apologize for getting these to you so late. We've been kind of busy getting the assessment roll and the taxes to the county, which are partially up there at this point, so tax statements should be out probably next week. The key factors on this report are nothing has really popped as far as over budgets. I think in November we do have some things that came up, and especially in December. I know I was working with Public Works today on our recycling. We need about $4,500 to cover our cost of our leaves recycling, and there's some other things that we've been looking at that we're very, very tight on at this point. But other than that, I think the key thing is we had a $250,000 short-term financing. We have about $96,000 of that remaining. $70,000 of it has to do with our energy, and about $11,000 of it has to do with the fire department and those kind of things. So we're very much on track. Our long-term financing, we have a little left over from the 2009 streets. I think that Tom is going to finish off in the spring. And other than that, we've kind of cut off the year very clean with possibly no extra funds laying around. I think the other thing that's very, very important is our investments. I have pulled in as many funds as I can and paid off as many bond issues that we've had outstanding that I could pull because our interest earnings are so low at now. Today I had 2 investments, one for $1 million and one for $500,000 called. One was at 1.5%, so they're calling 1.5% at this point. I also had a 2% call today. So to reinvest those funds, I'm not getting even 1.5%. So just to be aware that the investments out there are very, very lean. And so the utilization of our funds in the best way that we can is really important right now. So other than that, if you have any questions, send me an email and I'll answer them as best as I can.
Can I ask you a question right now? The first thing you said about Public Works, I missed that.
This is through October, so it's really, it's kind of like the November and December was when it really gets tight.
Okay.
And I was up with Deb going through some issues today, and she was working on recycling. One of the things is
Okay.
we're short $4,500 right now, so she was going to come and see where she could get a budget amendment to cover that. To cover those funds. I think IT right now is very, very tight. I think there's some areas that we really have to watch so we don't overspend.
Betty and I and Kathy have been trying to keep everything low within departments wherever possible. We haven't borrowed from one department to pay for another. We'll hopefully be able to do that through the end of the year because it's very important to do that, not to be stealing from one department and where we need it. We've also told them, if you don't, I know this sounds dumb, but if you don't have the money, don't spend it. And I know that doesn't seem like that's just something you'd have to tell people, but.
I want to write that down.
I know, but we've been emphasizing to that. There's, in the past, there's been times where it's been, oh, I bought this, I need the money for it, and where I think we finally got it across to them that we can't do that.
Questions for Betty? Thank you, Betty. Number 7, Public Works request to purchase the 2010 tandem dump truck, box, and plow. This is an item that was on the capital outlay budget in previous years, and we have postponed it. As the budget was developed this year, the Finance Committee did include this in the recommendation, and the council was provided a tentative capital outlay budget for next year. You remember that there was about $1 million to be spent on various projects, both street repair and equipment purchase. We had budgeted approximately $220,000 or something, I believe, for this. And the opportunity to purchase a truck for less than that presented itself. We've gone out and gotten bids. There's some changes happening with the 2011 model year, and so the suggestion from the Public Works Committee and now from the Finance Committee is to make this purchase now and to purchase the International truck for $97,970, 2010 model, and the body box and plow and equipment from Universal Equipment for $87,000.
So moved.
Second.
The motion and a second to approve the purchase. Any discussion?
Would like to point out to the council members that on page 3 of the budget that Betty has just gone through, maintenance of the equipment we have, which means these trucks, is running $100,000 over our budget, and that's why we need a new truck.
I wanted to bring something up with Tom, if I may. We talked about not decommissioning this truck. Is that's still your plan, not to decommission it, but to continue maintaining it?
The truck that we're gonna replace,
Yes.
we're still planning to keep it as a spare, just for emergency purposes, in the snow plowing season. In the summertime, we'll use it for hauling pieces of concrete where, it's gonna damage the other boxes or things like that.
And the next time it needs major repair, which is what Scott was talking about here in the
Oh,
maintenance
I
budget.
think we should think about getting rid of it at that point.
Yeah.
Good answer.
All right. Any other questions, comments? By doing this ahead of time, I don't have reservations about this purchase, but I'd like you all to be aware that what we proposed was to bond for $1.6 million next year, and $600,000 of that is tentatively in the interim financing, and then once we do the actual sell the notes, that $600,000 pertains to the purchase of the NMC building. The other $1 million is for our 2010 road repair projects, and the largest item other than that is this truck. If we were to postpone this truck further, that money could be reallocated somewhere else. If we were to not do the purchase of the NMC building, that $600,000 that we'll be borrowing could be used for something else. Obviously, that's the way budgeting works, is you set your priorities and go with them. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But later on tonight there is another item for another $600,000 of that. And this is somewhat I wouldn't say premature, but I'm struggling for the word. In a typical budget year, we set a rough amount to be borrowed. We wait until into probably February, March, and actually firm it up, sell the notes, make the final decisions about what we'll be purchasing. On tonight's meeting in December, we've got, potentially you will have committed about half of next year's long-term capital outlay. This decision's part of it. Scott?
Would like to point out, though, that you're correct in the $600,000 bonding for possible purchase of the NMC building. That will be offset, at least in part, maybe entirely, we don't know,
Yes.
by the sale of the current municipal building.
Correct. So with that, I'm sorry to interrupt, and was there anything else on the motion to approve purchase of this truck?
I just had a quick question.
Yes.
Do we know why we were off so much on the preliminary estimate of the cost, why it came in at less than half the cost?
Oh, it didn't come in, it was 230,
Yeah.
and it came in at 180, 195,
Oh, okay.
185.
Okay.
Gotta add the two numbers together.
Yeah.
Partly by buying this model year at this time, we are buying a brand-new truck that is soon going to be 1 model year old, and it really makes no difference to us. In fact, it's an advantage to us. That's part of it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion passes. Cheering has erupted in the Public Works Department. Number 9, recommendation for the Assessor Assistant Building Inspector position. We're recommending that we hire Mike Wallace as a part-time employee. At the time that we came up with the plan to accept Mike's resignation and to not replace him, we understood that we might have a need for some assessor duties this year, and we could have some need for some building inspection. We advertised the position. There were 3 applicants. Mike Wallace was the most qualified of them. We've met with him. We originally had thought maybe it'd be a 600-hour per year, 600 to 800-hour per year position. We put that in the budget. At this point, our best estimate is that it might be around half of that, and the motion from Finance Committee was to approve hiring Mike Wallace as an assessor, assistant building inspector for not over 350 hours for 2010 at $30 per hour.
So about 10, excuse me.
Move for approval.
Second.
There's a motion to approve and a second. Questions?
Quick math tells me that's a top of about 10,500.
That's right.
And I believe there was 24,000 that was
Yeah.
budgeted for. And the suggestion or the recommendation for finance is if we have a big increase in building permits and all that we need additional, that I would come back to the committee and the council and request additional hours.
That would be a very happy problem.
Any other comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And the recommendation is adopted. And that takes care of Finance Committee, I believe. Let's move on to unfinished business. Chuck Schwartz, update on projects.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Not a lot to report here. This will be my last one. My intent is this will be the last update until spring construction starts up again, unless I'm instructed otherwise by staff or this council. Not a lot here to present. The conditions assessment on the building was completed. And we did complete the data collection and topographical survey information for both the Second and Vine intersection and the other downtown drainage study that we'll be doing. Did appreciate the comments from the public regarding the safety of Vine and Second intersection, and absolutely we'll keep that in the back of our minds, and eventually down the road here when we actually get authorization to do plans and specs on that.
When you did the topographical work, did you look at a sidewalk on the north side?
Well, that's just surveying existing, and so, we went building to building front, essentially, and down the road a certain distance just to get what's there existing.
Okay, any other questions for Chuck? Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome, thank you.
All right, under new business, we've got a resolution that came from the school district. The item is number 9A, consider approval of the November 10th school district resolution regarding crossing guards.
Second.
Do we need to suspend the rules?
We're just approving their resolution. It's not a resolution on our part, correct?
Right, and I guess I do have some comments on it.
Yeah, we've got some comments, but we've got a motion and a second. Maybe we'll start with yours, and then I think Chief Jensen has got some things to potentially say or questions, so take it away.
Oh, okay. Well, I think in discussing this with the police chief and public works, we wanted to, or the city felt it, staff felt they should get some language either in the resolution or as conditional that crossings can only take place, or can only occur in designated signed crosswalks, and that training of school crossing guards is the responsibility of the school district. I understand that right now the police school liaison officer has been doing that. I just think if the city is going to approve this, we want those conditions as to how it's done agreed to by the school district, that it's obviously only going to be in designated crosswalks and that they're going to be trained, and that's the responsibility of the school district. And we can, at first the suggestion was to have them amend the resolution. I'm fine with making it conditional on those items, in which case those conditions would have to go back to the school district.
Do you anticipate further is Marty here? Marty, do you have further conditions you'd like to add?
Well, it was one other that we discussed was the location within the city where these crossing guards would be at. Let the city know that we're gonna have them at the high school or up by the middle school, exactly where these crossing guards would be, so that we could monitor the situation when school's in session. I did talk to Kathy about this today, and then I talked with Nancy Sweet from the school district. They didn't have a problem with doing this, but they were hoping to do it like in a memorandum of understanding, so that it would be an attachment to this resolution. She's already said that some of the districts have already signed off on this and returned it to the school district, so they would have to amend their resolution and send it back all out again. She was willing to do a memorandum of understanding and bring that back to the school district if we could use the resolution as it sits right now. So when I talked to Kathy today, we were trying to work out, maybe we'll send them a memorandum of understanding, have them sign it, and then we could have the council approve the resolution attachment with the MOU.
We can be conditional on that. Approval can be conditional on that.
Correct.
Well, I'm willing to amend my motion to incorporate your conditions in Marty's condition, if that's okay with the second.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so the motion's amended.
And so the location of crossing guards, you're anticipating it's changing? I mean, they've been the same for years, right?
Well, they have been the same for years, but say from now, just for point, they decide to put crossing guards out at Crestview Drive or out at Rivercrest School. It'd be nice to know that they're doing that. Or if they decide they're going to use the crossing guards up at farther down on Carmichael by the middle school,
Or
where they don't have them right now.
Vine and Grandview.
Yeah, right. If they're going to move them around or they're going to add additional ones, we'd like to know about it.
Okay, so there's a motion to approve with the conditions stated. Did you get the condition down? Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Say no. Motion passes, and we've approved the crossing guard plan. All right, number C, consider authorization to execute documents for purchase of property at 700 First Street and 701 Second Street. This is, well, you can see there's a number of agenda items. They're all related. We've got C, which is, are we going to buy this building? We've got E, which has to do with moving the money around before the end of the year to accomplish the closing. We've got F, which is reapproval of the lease agreement with the Hudson Area Joint Library for space at 700 First Street. Let me touch on that very briefly. You know that the library board voted on this, and then it came to us. The challenge that I had and Catherine had with that was the library board's approval had 4 conditions, 2 of which were pretty easy. One was absolutely a non-starter. It was asking the council to bind future councils in their ability to pass ordinances, and that we couldn't do. And another one we could agree to with a little tweak. So essentially they had a conditional approval. We took it back through our attorneys after that and came up with language that I think is acceptable. That'll be an item for tonight. If you want to take that one up now, and we can do that first, I think. It's not the way it is on your order, but it might be a piece leading up to the decision of should we buy the building, is do we have a lease with our major tenant? So my suggestion might be to deal with that one first. The question then became, did the library board grant the president of the library board the authority to sign a lease that comes back from us that's been somewhat changed since the library board saw it? And I think the right answer to that was for us to go to the attorneys, get it worked out, bring it back to you to vote on, send it back to them to vote on. They're not significant changes, but they are changes. It's a matter of some critical importance, I think, and so we want to be as open and transparent as possible. So that's my suggestion, is I'm going to be the most comfortable if they reapprove it, and I think they're going to plan to do that based on what we approve. We'll send back to them what they asked for with some minor modifications approved by us, and they're going to need to decide on their own terms how they give their president authority to sign that lease. Did I summarize that correctly?
Well, yes, except that I think the lease, as to the library board's conditions, nothing has changed in terms of the language that the council approved. There's been no further negotiation on that, and we think it's acceptable. It was acceptable to the chair, but I didn't hear anything back in terms of whether the library board was going to meet again.
I should point out, maybe I wasn't being completely clear. In addition to those 4 items, we found some additional items. For one, in regards to insurance, there was a clause in there asking for some things dealing with subrogation of insurance. It was boilerplate language that came from one of the attorneys involved, and it's kind of standard lease language. But what we learned is for both liability insurance, the city has the same carrier as the library under 2 different policies, I think. And for the property casualty type insurance, the city again has the same carrier, a different carrier, but the same as the library under 2 different policies.
Yeah.
The long and the short of it is the language didn't work.
Yeah, the language in the insurance was not correct. It required a liability limit that's in excess of what the library has. Well,
that they could write.
And it required an umbrella, which is not available through their policy. So the same insurance company and insurance agent does the policies for both entities. I talked with him. He said, if you put in the numbers that the library currently has, 3 million liability, that is sufficient protection. And the subrogation clause was not available for local government property insurance. So those are the only things really that's in front of the council that's different in this agreement than what the council approved at its last meeting. And it's just a function of what kind of coverage the library actually has. I don't think the library checked into it before looking at this agreement, and frankly, neither did I, until I found out it was both had the same policies or same company. So
with that, my recommendation on that item, and you remember this lease is contingent on your decision to buy the building, but if we buy the building, then we'll have a lease with them. And I'd like your approval for these changes that have been made, so that this is a final lease.
Move to approve the reapproval of this lease agreement with the Hudson Area Joint Library.
Okay, so there's
Second.
a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I think we've mashed these potatoes. So often they're in danger of turning into soup.
With you there. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. That passes. Would you like to look at the resolution 1909 in some detail? And I'll show you what the plan is for how we would pay.
Actually, yeah, because I think there's a lot of good points made by the general public. I know we understand, but
Yep.
I guess the impression that we're raising taxes or we're doing this or that needs to be made clear again tonight.
Randy, can I address that for just a second?
Yes.
Because if I may make a comment, because I think you're absolutely on point there. And I would have to say that there were 2 referenda votes last year in which the public told us 3-1 they wanted to move to the NMC building for the library. And the second question was, after some economic bad times had hit, do you want us to raise your taxes in order to do that? And they said no. And so we have found a way in which to move the library to the NMC building without raising anybody's taxes. So I believe we're doing exactly as the public instructed us.
And I agree. I just want to make sure that some of the misnomers and whatnot was said tonight, that we're very clear on what our purchasing and how we're going about it, as far as mill rate and taxes, increase, decrease, whatever.
Okay.
I think there's more discussion to be had on that point, but maybe this isn't the agenda item in which to discuss.
Nobody's going to curtail discussion, and I'm going to try not to step on your toes, so at any point you've got something to say, you can jump in. I mean, I do think that we should review the facts and some information here publicly as we go through this process so that people can see that we've given it due diligence, and no one has taken this decision light. And I'd further say that the reason it's here tonight, even though we have until the 15th to make the decision, is that I felt like to follow the council rules on, for example, this resolution, you could say, well, why isn't it a first reading tonight and we have time for input and come back? That's up to you. If you want to discuss this tonight and if you want to set a special meeting between now and that deadline, we could certainly do that. If you prefer not to do so, we can make decisions tonight. As to the financing plan, I've presented this to you before. It's coming to you now in a resolution form. The idea here is that there's $2.5 million in the purchase price, that the library is going to be asked to do their own leasehold improvements and remodeling, and that to do that, they have to come up with the money themselves for that. The sources there, I believe, will be their impact fee funds. I have said, you haven't yet been asked to concur on that, but we haven't dispersed those impact fee funds in the past. It's been my position that while they were collected for library use, that the city still controls what they are used on. And at the time that it's time to disperse those, we probably ought to have a formal vote on that. That might be some subject of disagreement with some, but I think it's a pretty simple thing. I think this is a good use of those funds to remodel this building to make it suitable for the library. That's not in this resolution, but it is part of our financing plan. So they'd be adding an elevator, and they'd be making some changes within the building, and probably raising other funds along the way, both for those renovations and conceivably for operating, and that's going to be the library board's business. They're an independent entity. Once we make our annual budget allocation to them, we have no further control over them in regard to budget. We have somewhat closer relationship than some library boards in that they don't own their own building here, and so they've been a tenant of ours. And if we ultimately sign and execute this lease with them, as I suspect we will, if we buy the building, they'll continue to be our tenant. But other than that, once the annual budget allocation is made, the library board is a very independent entity. We don't control them. So there's that. As far as the two and a half, yeah.
Can I just make one comment on the impact fee, use of impact fees? That is addressed in the lease agreement,
Okay.
that the lease authorizes them to use them for leasehold improvements.
All right,
to the
good. I'd
extent
forgotten about that.
provided by
So
law.
we would have given our approval on that.
Yeah.
Thank you. The basic idea here in a nutshell is that we would borrow $600,000 and not an additional $600,000. We would forego other improvements or purchases that would have happened in 2010 that will be now postponed until 2011 or a later future year. And by doing so, we will instead spend $600,000 of next year's annual long-term borrowing that we do, and we'll spend that to buy this building. The remainder of the purchase price will come from money that has been accumulated, saved from a variety of ways. The first line on Resolution 919 comes from last year's TID closure. You remember that the city, the county, the school district got money there. We spent half of the money to pay down debt for the purchase of Prospect Park property, the former hospital site. The rest, we had Betty invest for us, and that's the $630,000 there. So we will have taken that money from the TID closure and used half of it to defray debt and the other half to buy this building.
Is the 630 the remaining balance of the TID?
Plus interest accumulated over the last 18 months or whatever it's been. 8 months? I don't know. Yes.
Okay.
The general fund balance undesignated is a large portion of this, $870,000. We have a finance plan in the city, and it calls for us to maintain a percentage of our annual operating costs in an undesignated fund balance. That's essentially our cash reserve. It has been well over what our plan calls for it to be at minimum. We gradually had accumulated that up to a point that instead of being, Betty, 27, what's the minimum called for? 27%? 27, yes. The minimum's 27, and this 870,000 is in excess of the 27% of an annual. The $200,000 coming from the parking utility collects money on a daily basis from fines downtown. The main purpose of that as a segregated fund is to pay for maintenance of our current parking lots and the acquisition of new parking in the city. And so my suggestion in this resolution calls for us to use $200,000 of that.
And the remaining balance?
Probably about $30,000 or something like that.
Which is adequate to do the proper maintenance?
Adequate, we should be able to recover in about a year.
Okay.
It isn't in the resolution this way, but an alternate that could be done is for that to be a loan and for us to, at a future date, when the money becomes available, to repay that. For example, if we sell other property within the city, rather than it going to replenish the undesignated fund balance or to defray the $600,000 that we're borrowing, you could make a direction that we would restore that $200,000 to the parking utility. My point in bringing it up this way from the beginning was to say we are buying a new municipal parking lot. It'll be open to the public. It's 52 spots in downtown Hudson, where we recognize that parking is always at a premium. And so it seems like a legitimate use of parking utility funds. However, if you don't agree with that, that would be the way to proceed, I think, would be to instead borrow the money there and return it later. And then the capital project fund balance, $200,000, this comes from a prior year capital outlay budget. In other words, we did long-term sale of 10-year notes for a designated list of projects. The projects didn't use all the money that was set aside, and so for that 1 year, was it 2008? It's accumulation over time. My suggestion is to spend that. So this is how we're making this purchase, by borrowing only $600,000 of it. Now, I wanted to go through that with you. If you have questions about that, I think this is one of the parts that need to be discussed under the item, should we buy the building? We need to talk about the mechanical, physical, structural soundness of the building. We need to talk about the operating expenses of the building for both us as the landlord for the library and for us as the police department. We need to talk about our part of leasehold improvements to make it suitable for the police department. We need to talk about where the money will come from for the purchase. And then we need to talk about what happens as we go into the future with the various scenarios of the library buys it, the library doesn't buy it, so on like that. So we can have as much discussion as you want. I'm going to stop talking, and you can take up any of these items, questions, discussion about them. Let's try to cover it, Alan.
I had two items. Number one, the police department remodeling. We had allocated $200,000. I think, is Marty still here? Yep. And in his memo, he had put some information that the estimate was between $300,000 and $350,000 from the architect. And I just want to, reiterate that there's only $200,000 available. Whether or not it's, so I think he has to, if it's that far off, that's a problem, because we don't have $150,000 extra money to put into that. So that's a key element in this building. So, Marty, I don't know if I know you had a contractor come out and it came in at closer to $200,000, but I don't see where we can come up with another $150,000 for remodeling the police area.
And I think is a good question, because I didn't have really any money to go out and have somebody give me a good cost estimate of what it would cost to remodel and get just the basic things in there for us to do. Mr. Redmond from BKB was kind enough to do that. He said that his figures were about 10 or 15% accurate within that, range. But he said that he would have to spend money to have somebody go and do an exact cost estimate to have that kind of stuff done.
So my question to you, Marty, is can you live with $200,000? Because that's all that I think we have available to give you.
Well, if $200,000 gets us in the building, gets us set up, yeah, we can live with that. What the understanding is, maybe in next year getting some more money to do improvements if we have to continue on. The other thing is that we hate to go into that building haphazard. Granted, it's going to give us 400% increase in space. Just the first floor alone almost doubles the space that I have currently downstairs, including my garage space, which is fantastic. But if I can't have desks or walls put in or bulletproof glass for my entrance area and so forth, you know, or put a new evidence room in, then, you know, it doesn't do us any good.
So I think that's a major item.
Well, yeah.
It'll take some really tight project management, risk assessment to figure out which things are the most important.
Yeah, exactly.
And my,
Let's talk that through, 'cause I think it's a pretty important point for us as a city. I mean, I think we wear multiple hats, but in a certain sense, while we want this to work the best as it can for the library, we also have to look out for the police department, and probably more than anything else for me, the city taxpayers. And the question was asked earlier, who looks out for the widow who's on a fixed income? I use that criteria for making decisions all the time. And we have not raised taxes, and this plan doesn't raise taxes. And the question is, can we make it work for us and solve a problem that we're facing by buying this building? And that's the question for you to answer tonight, and it won't be just me answering it. It's for all of us to look at this together, and I hope that you've taken a cold look at it and all the facets. And if you don't have enough information tonight, there's still time for us to get you more information. But let's talk about these leasehold. I think you can break it down, Alan, into probably 3 key things that the building needs as a must. One is, and if you'd look at this plan of Marty's report, which is, it's a floor plan of the building. And if you look at this, what I call kind of in the crook of the elbow, it's an L-shaped building right in there. It's on the east side of the building, on the northeast, in the corner there. That would be the main entrance into the main lobby out of the parking lot. And there are 3 ways into the police department here. This is one of the advantages to this building that we saw Frisbee when they first looked at it. They saw that right away. It's one of our deficiencies in our current police space. We don't have multiple ways to get in. In this building, we do. The first is through the underground parking. So you can drive in, you could have somebody in the car with you, you can drive in, you can come up through the stairs or through the elevator. The second is what's marked on here as employee entrance. It's along the east side of the police wing of the building. That would be a electronically controlled, we hope, but an access controlled entrance for police officers only. The public's not going to go through that entrance, or only escorted by a policeman if they do. So that would be an always locked door. But that's access right out of the parking lot. There would be 6 designated police parking spots right near that entrance where they could pull up and they'll walk right in that building, not needing to interact with anybody else at that point. And then there's the public entrance, which is marked on here as main entrance. The key remodeling thing that we need to accomplish here is there will need to be a new demising wall that breaks off the police wing from that main public lobby. That has to happen. And the way that it's been planned out, you would step through some doors into like a small waiting room, and then thered be another, the glass like we have right now, where there's some sort of a glass service counter, glass enclosed service counter. So that's one. That is in itself not a terribly large remodeling project, but it's pretty well key. I'd say this project can't go forward without that. So if that takes the whole $200,000, I'd be pretty surprised, but it'll have to take as much as it takes to get it done. The second thing, probably as key, is to get the secured access to the doors. There is already a card key access system in this building. We're not sure what exactly it's going to take to get that changed around to our use. We may have to buy a whole new system. We're not certain about that at this point. You could see in Mike Kruger's memo, he wrote that the current security system will need to be upgraded with additional door security for the police department, and that's a pretty high priority. And then the third thing is to improve the secure storage for evidence down in the lower level. And we don't know exactly what will need to be done there. Taking these broad strokes ideas, the one architect came up with sort of A, B, and C, and A and B we haven't even told you about because they were, one was over $1 million and one was $700,000 worth of remodeling. And so what you heard about was C. We've had a couple of other people, including a local contractor, go and look at the remodeling and the construction of that demising wall and some new walls and doors to make the evidence storage. I'm pretty confident that for less than the 350, and I think we can do it in the 200,000 range. There isn't an additional 100,000, although we did put in the budget $30,000 for furniture for the police department. That was partly my way, and I think I told you this at the time, that I suspected that they might need a little more than the $200,000. So they actually have 230, if you look, all told, including some of that furniture, is in the budget. Now tonight, the truck came in, what, $20,000 under budget. So as you go along, if we needed to come up with some money, you could do it. I hope we don't have to do that because I've been unflinching and saying there won't be any more money than what was in the budget that we passed a few weeks ago. So I agree with you. Any more questions about that?
Well, it also could be, maybe we order one patrol car instead of two.
It could be.
That we approved two tonight. That was a concern I have. Then the second item I have is the lease from the cable television.
Yes.
I would be, unless I'm reading this wrong, I don't want to keep 4th Street open until June 30th of next year.
Well, let me address that a little bit.
Yes, okay.
So the idea here is that we will not operate this as an additional building. We will divest ourselves of, the city won't be the owner and operator of the 911 4th Street building anymore. You recall the history of that building was it was the county government center. County built a new building, didn't need it anymore. We were looking for library space. We bought it primarily as a place to move the library. It had a lot more space in it than we needed for just the library, and so we moved some other departments in there and rented the rest. It came with a courtroom, so we moved municipal court there. Cable TV ultimately moved in there, and so on. So the question is about cable TV and where they're at. Okay, the purchase here is a two-building purchase. Most of the attention is on the NMC building, the large 40,000 square foot building. Not very much attention on the 2nd Street building, which is about 3,500 square feet. It was once the office for the lumberyard. It's been used as retail space. Excel used it as office space, did some fairly extensive remodeling and improvements to the building. One of their representatives told me they spent $200,000 remodeling this building. However, it has for a long time now been a single tenant building. The plan that I originally brought to you when I asked you to consider this was that would be key to our being able to get out of 4th Street, because I was hoping that we could move our tenants over there, and I was also hoping that I could bring you tonight lease agreements with some of those tenants. We've not been able to put that together, although there's a lot of interest in that. One of the first groups to look at it was cable TV. They're our largest tenant in the 4th Street building. They analyzed this building and found it not suitable for their needs for a variety of reasons. Upstairs, they couldn't figure out a way to make a recording studio. Downstairs, it was previously an audio recording studio, so I had felt maybe that would work. It didn't. There's some challenges. We had our Bonastro architect go look at it with them and try to work it out, and they just couldn't work it out. So at this point, they're no longer interested in being in that building. Now, Community Action currently has a lease. They're the only one. Everyone else in the 4th Street building has been month to month. About a year ago, Community Action wanted to move to a different spot. We did some negotiating. We agreed to give them new carpeting and things if they'd sign a 1-year lease, and I'm not sure exactly when it's up, but it's around the middle of, is it June?
I believe so.
So that's part of it, Alan, is we won't be, I mean, we'll be selling it with tenants in place, and that's what Community Action wants. The reason that agenda item number G here is consider amending the lease agreement with Community Access. They've had a lease agreement for a long time, but it's been run month to month. And so if we sell this building January 10th, and there's a closing in February, which would be very optimistic, but let's say it happened, the new owner could give them notice, 30 days notice, because that's all they have. They don't have a lease that protects them. They'd like to have a lease that protects them so that the new owner would have to let them stay at least until June 30th. Just because you sign a lease extension doesn't necessarily mean that you can't sell the building. You can sell a building with tenants in it. So, go ahead.
Well, I don't want to put us in that kind of situation where we have to keep that building open. I know we have a lease with Community Action. I think we could probably buy that lease out. It's not a big lease, is it?
No.
So.
And Community Action's it's Youth Action Hudson. I don't think I'd be speaking out of turn to say that I know they're interested in this building. I mean, I was at their fundraising breakfast when they kind of teased about, wouldn't it be nice if we had a nice Second Street location? They have long wanted a more visible location, and this might work out very nicely for them. So I think it's likely that they will be one of the tenants in that building.
One of the concerns I have, again, is to operating two buildings, when our objective is to get to one building ASAP in order to minimize the costs of the operation. Operating two buildings is not in our best interest. And that 4th Street building is a energy hog, and a building that the sooner we can pass that on or sell it or shut it down is to our advantage, in my opinion.
Well, I'm going to reject your characterization that it's an energy hog. I think it's a great building, and it'd be a great value. We bought it for, I don't know how much. Betty, what'd we pay, 400 or 300?
I didn't get that followed through.
Okay, well, see, I was thinking it was only 300, but somebody told me 400. I guess we got to look that up. We bought it from the county, and it has served us pretty well. Okay, the challenge we've got with it is it's roughly 30,000 square feet, and the library would much prefer to be somewhere else. And before they were to spend this impact fee money remodeling it, then I think we as the landlord, giving them a lease that we pay the utilities, we would want to put money into making it more energy efficient. And our analysis of that this year by the Honeywell study showed that we should put about $250,000 into it. So the decision we're facing on that is we stay there. The library drew up plans. They were going to maybe possibly spend $500,000 remodeling. And we would probably be looking at some pretty extensive energy upgrades to make it more energy efficient. And that's kind of where that stands. Okay, to the operating question, I'm still answering his. I think there's a lot of questions about operating. I've tasked Devin with working this over. As new information came in, he's changed the operating numbers. His current scenario shows us operating our 2010 budget, as you passed and approved it already, with us running this building through the end of June. And we've got detailed numbers on that here, and if there's anything in there that you think is overly optimistic or too conservative or whatever you want, we can certainly change it. But it's more or less in the black. You want to take them through that a little, Devin?
I kind of got the pages back. Go ahead, Glenn.
I don't want to skip over this, or just cut short the discussion on that building on the corner, because if cable doesn't move there, are we thinking Community Action would be the sole tenant? I mean, I don't want a building that we're just looking
this is going to tie in pretty good to what Devin's going to talk about. Let me give you kind of a broad picture here. You remember when I first brought you this plan, I said we would need to get $160,000 in rent.
Mm-hmm.
We gotta get 120 minimum, no less from the library, and we're gonna have to get $40,000 from the White Building each year in rent. At our last council meeting, when I gave you an update, I said I thought that in the interest of being conservative, we should lower our number for the White Building on Second Street down to $30,000. So that's $2,500 a month. So anybody that's out there listening that wants to rent that building, $2,500 a month, that's gross. So that means we're paying the heat and the lights and everything on it. And it's retail space on Second Street, and it's been retail in the past. I'm pretty convinced that we will get that. And I think before it's all over, what we're going to find is we've got a couple of people. We may be able to do a deal that's a 2-tenant deal with one in the upstairs and one in the lower, but that's all still in negotiation, so I'm not really prepared to talk about that in open session. We're going to continue to deal with them. If we can't get those leases with our nonprofits, then we'll have to put up a for rent sign on that, or else work at selling that building if it really doesn't fit our needs. So the answer, Lori, is this current thing is based on $150,000 of income coming from outside the city, 120 from the library, 30,000 on that building, or $2,500 a month. And the best I can tell you right now is I still think that that's reasonable. We may do better, we may not, but I'm going to suggest to you tonight that we may not have that building leased at the time that you're asked to make the decision on whether or not to buy it. Will you be back?
2 minutes.
Yeah, no
In a
problem. All right.
Second page, I should have had these in reverse order, is 911 4th Street, assuming we operate it through June 30th. I basically took the operating costs, personnel costs, and halved them, just cut them right in half. That assumes the tenants will be there through June 30th, the expenses, the heat, the electricity, and then the rent also assumes the library will be there through June 30th, paying rent there. Now, I don't know if that'll happen or not, but until they're out of there, the agreement says they have to pay rent. And if they're not there, then the operating costs will come back down. We currently operate that at a deficit anyway. I mean, that building does not make us any money, partially because there's common areas, but we've never covered our costs on that building. The 701 First Street and 702nd Street, the 2010, those are estimated expenditures. I've taken what we spent at the municipal building, increased it for space, decreased it for the fact that we're hoping it'll be a little more energy efficient. That's an estimate of the expenditures. The rent, the $105,000, the agreement is that the library will pay, whether they're in there or not, will pay $5,000 for the first 3 months of the year and $10,000 for the rest of the year, regardless of when they go in there. So that's $105,000. And then the rent for the Second Street assumes that someone moves in there July 1st. So that's where the $120,000 comes in. 2011 assumes a full operating year. Again, that's just estimates based on what we know. I've been very conservative on these numbers. They're probably about 150 to 175% of what we're paying now at the municipal building, which I think is higher than we'll pay, but I didn't want to paint too rosy of a picture that, we were going to, I don't want to be making money, but that there'd be excess. And then the rent, there is an escalator clause in the rent of anywhere between 1% and 5%, depending on the cost of living. I put it at 2%, just for a number in there. And then $30,000 for rent assumes we have tenants at $2,500 a month. So as you can see, we're at about break even, which is fine because we're a nonprofit and the intent isn't for us to necessarily make money on it. The numbers are pretty conservative for the utilities. And personnel, the one thing that in the memo from the Public Works Department that I worked with Tom, we are going to try to operate with the same number of full-time equivalents that we have now, which is 1.75. Terry would move from the municipal building over to the NMC building, and then Pat would assist somewhat. If that does occur, there would be a shift of 2010 budget money from City Hall over to the NMC building to cover whatever hours pad ended up. So that's kind of where we are on it. I've gone through it several times. You know, Al and I had a conversation about it. So if there's something you think I'm missing in here, you can let me know. But
Which leads me back to, the sooner we can get 4th Street closed and out, we save money that we can utilize someplace else, or not spend.
I agree with you.
Okay.
Later tonight, possibly much later, we may go into closed session if you desire, and we can talk about taking steps to do that.
Yep.
Is there any option here to, because a lot of this is the heating costs, is there any option, if for some reason the building doesn't sell, we get all the tenants out and can mothball the building?
Sure.
During the summer months, that's pretty easily accomplished, and costs will go way down. Don't run the lights, there's no
the cost
heating.
during the summer go down anyway, but it'll go down substantially. One other quick thing, in question insurance came up and what we would pay for property insurance. Actually, what they have for replacement cost of the municipal building is more than what would be paying for this building. So assuming we close that one and open the other one, it would probably be a wash, so there wouldn't be a major increase in our property insurance. Someone brought that up today, and I just wanted to mention that.
Alan?
Yes?
If you buy a building for less than its true fair market value, would you be wiser to insure it for its actual replacement cost or for your purchase cost?
You should have to pay for it, the cost to rebuild it.
Right.
So I suspect we'll not be insuring that building for $2.2 million.
The municipal building right now is at 4.5 million is what it's insured for.
That building's 4.5?
Where that number's been in there.
Was that a
for-
bid? Do I hear 4.6?
Don't give any artists
Sold.
any ideas.
But, you know, what it would cost to replace the NMC building, I don't know, but up to 4.5 million, and it's 1/20th of a cent for every dollar, so it isn't a substantial.
That might be one place. We might want to amend that insurance coverage right away. In our elevator contracts and our Honeywell contracts, there's things we could do to start to ramp down our costs there. Other questions?
Back to that, the cable access. What identity does that have? Do we control where they can go or not go? They're a separate board, right?
The which now? You lost
Cable
me.
access.
Oh, no, we don't control them. They are a separate board. And you know, frankly, I asked the architect to meet with them and explore all options, even if it would be expensive renovations, and the answer that came back is they just don't feel like that building's gonna fit their needs.
But we can't
I
stop.
think you can consider that as water under the bridge. And part of the thing is to put the building to its highest and best use, Randy, who's gonna be there long-term and will provide the best rent, if you will, to us. You don't necessarily want to put someone in there where it doesn't work for them.
Now,
May I address that for just a moment, being the city's representative to the cable board? I've been over the building twice with other cable board members, and the problem is, as the mayor alluded to earlier, the lower level had been an audio recording studio, and it's fine for that. But in video recording, you need space for lights, cameras, and in this case, the ceiling's too low to allow you to put any lights up. The supporting posts that connect to the overhead beams are always right where you don't want them for a video studio. It's unfortunate for that. It would have been better had we been able to go below grade from 2nd Street, because on 2nd Street, which was the open area, that's next to State Highway 35 with 18-wheelers coming by while you're trying to record something, and that just doesn't work.
Okay?
So do we have to purchase that building with this?
Yes.
Okay.
Devin?
Not if we don't sign, right? I mean, if we choose not to go ahead.
Oh, yeah, you can-
rewrite a different agreement.
You can vote no. Let's talk that through a little bit, though. I mean, here's some of the challenges. That this property has been one property going back into history. Back into history, it's been one. I think, Denny, am I right? I'm not sure it's ever been subdivided for a long, long time. I mean, certainly since before it was lumberyard.
As far as I know, it's been one parcel.
It's been one parcel. It extends from 2nd Street down to 1st Street, and it's approximately half of the city block. There's some challenges with segregating it. There is interest in that. The library would honestly probably prefer to split it off and have someone else ultimately become the owner of it. And the city may ultimately be doing that, but because there's some work to be done on that, we would need to decide, well, where will the new property line be and where will the subdivision be? And then the rest of downtown, of course, you know that there isn't off-street parking for buildings of this size. Off-street parking is not required in downtown. On the other hand, almost every downtown business has access from an alleyway. This one doesn't. It's always been one parcel, so it doesn't have the alley coming through that lets people get into the back of their building. So we'll have to work out things like probably a easement agreement across the parking lot and probably some sort of a parking lot sharing agreement, things like that. Those are things that can be worked out. And I think there's at least one interested buyer that's contacted me and is seriously might be interested in at some point becoming an owner of it. We can work that out, but we're probably not going to have that worked out ahead of time. This deal is short enough that with 5 weeks and public entities involved, just waiting for cable to make their decision, and they had their meeting on December 4th, I think it was, and so on. I mean, it's moved along. Right, when was your meeting?
The first.
The
December
first. They have to have time to go through due diligence on their own and then make a decision in a public meeting, and it takes time. And now we're dealing with some other entities that all have boards and finance committees and so on. To get all that done and get it all done in 5 weeks is a little hard when you have to wait for, you know, somebody has to go first and then next and so on. And we're working through that. I wish that I could have had that all done for you, but I can just report to you that you're going to have to make this decision without knowing who the tenants for that building are going to be and without knowing what they're going to pay. Unless you postpone and wait to the last possible minute and we're able to tie up one of them. And that's a potential thing to do here.
I mean, part of the interest here is limiting the liability that the city has.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. I mean, it's providing space for the police department. It's having a secure tenant in the library, but it's also limiting the longer-term liability for the city. So in the interest of that, I would just
correct.
Like us to
our lease rate in the municipal building for the tenants that are left, I mean, if we were to have kept all of them, do you have that, Devin?
It's $13 a square foot.
And we charge $13.
I think we take in about $100,000 a year.
So this building, and that includes the library, but take the library out of it because they pay a completely different rate, and they pay $6. Everybody else pays $13. That $40,000 number that I originally brought you was based on a 3,500 square foot building and getting the same rate as we were getting over on the top floor or the basement corner of the municipal building. I think this is much better space. Given time, we'll find tenants that probably value this a lot higher than they value the space that they're in over there. And if we kept all of those tenants and moved them over, we'd probably more than fill it, because there's probably not enough space in this building for all of them. So this isn't simple, and there's going to be some uncertainty in this for you. No?
Other than the cable and the library, it's about $2,100 a month is what we take in from the other four. Family Means, Crossroads, Youth Action, and soccer.
So Family Means and Crossroads in the municipal building have got small offices, roughly about $400 a month for each of them.
Soccer is about $250.
And then there's Youth Action, which has expressed interest in this
And right
Second
now, I
Street
believe
building.
there's 3 smaller offices that are vacant right now that used to be Youth Actions that
Right.
we use as small meeting rooms, or the tutors use them. We
Yeah.
do rent some of them, but not for any substantial amount.
questions.
Can we talk about the inspection report?
Yep. Okay, so there have been a couple of inspections done. There was an informal inspection done. I shouldn't say informal, but BKV is the architect firm that designed the building and built it and has worked with the library, and they did go through this building as part of the library's due diligence on it. We hired Bonestro, our city engineer firm, and Bruce Paulson is the project architect who prepared the report that's here.
It's a lot of information. The only thing I don't see is the potential cost of doing all these things.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's been a lot of work done in a short period of time. I appreciate it, and I'm acknowledging that. But if I were purchasing a house and I had a list this long, I'd want to know what the grand total was going to be. I don't know how long it would take to get that information. Probably longer than we have until the 16th, but
so let's just say this. If you want, we can get Chuck. I know this isn't your deal, but maybe you can help a little. So let's say, okay, the south wall in the main floor office located on the southeast corner of the building has a crack in the gypsum board below the window. So what that means is there's a crack in the drywall in that room. This isn't apropos of that particular item, but how long would it take us to get a construction estimate to repair that?
Before December 15th, huh?
Yeah.
Well, one thing I should mention is Bruce Paulson's father passed away this weekend. So that I do believe he's going to be in a little bit later this week. So that puts a little bit of a wrench in things here. But you know, if you were to decide, you know, I'm sure I can go back to the office and with like 3 days we could give, you know, some rough idea on what these costs are. I don't think there's anything monumental in here that we can't make some engineering judgment on. You know, some of them, you know, it's a little bit of a mystery, like you said, that the electronic pads, whether they just don't know how to operate them or whether they're legitimately broken. But, you know, we could put together costs and say, here's what a new one would be. So, you know, I think we could do that in the time frame that that you need it to be done. We'll get it done.
it was, yeah.
One of the questions here, Lori, that comes up, because this is kind of, it's a little bit, you use your home analogy, but it's a little bit like, I might use a car analogy. We're trading up from an older, smaller car or home to a newer, larger car or home. And there will continue to be maintenance expenses. I mean, if we were to have any of our current municipal buildings inspected to this level, I don't care to talk about the 4th Street building in this, let's just talk about City Hall. You know, a year ago when I was elected, I went on a tour, and one of the things as we toured around, I was shown the windows around up on the roof of the 3rd level, and they were greatly deteriorated. And, you know, on any given building at any given time, there are maintenance things, some of which are urgent, some of which can be deferred.
Okay, so can we get costs on the urgent things? I mean, the things that we absolutely need to do.
Yeah, we can.
Why would we not do that? I'm seeing different expressions around the table. Why would we not do that?
Well, we're asking the police department to give an estimate what it'll cost to do their work downstairs, and I guess it's reasonable for us to be asking that same question. You know, I saw something that there was mold somewhere, and we're not sure how it got there, or right, if you go back to page 5.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, you know, getting an idea of what this is going to cost us makes sense.
All right, Chuck, well, I think, so one of the pieces of information is Bruce might be out of the office for a while.
Yeah, I know he'll be back next week, but we have other, as far as the structural and electrical, that's all being done by other people as well. Anyways, it's just for the architectural component of it, Bruce physically witnessed that, so.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's something we can certainly handle for you, and whatever you decide you need.
And I'm not saying every little crack, every little, the remote control and the blinds, that's not a big issue. But I'm saying if there are key things, I saw security camera and intercom system on page 4, number 13. Just the things that we'd want to get taken care of before we took occupancy.
Well, in regards to the security system, as I said earlier, I think there are probably 3 priorities for our budget for renovations, and one is to secure the access off the lobby. The second is to take that security system that's there, work it over, and decide whether we can make that fit our needs or whether we need to purchase something new. And different people have gotten bids on that. Marty, you had what was your information? Was that in your memo? I'm sorry.
I don't think so. I didn't get that portion of the memo. I talked to not a security consultant, but a IT consultant company that does public safety buildings and so forth. Just asked them general questions, how much it would cost to put in a security system if the system was already in. The consultant kind of took a general look at the building and then came back and gave me an estimate of about $24,000 to $25,000. I know that the BKV architect had put $65,000 in there, but he believed that with the system that was currently in there, if it was usable, it would not be that expensive.
Okay, so page by page, on the architectural general conditions, there's some cracks in drywall in 2 different offices. There's the door onto one of the north decks has some delamination at the bottom of the door, and the door will ultimately need to be replaced. There's some mortar joints that need some attention and some caulking. I would guess a lot of that our public works guys could do what I've mentioned so far.
May I suggest
Yes.
that being in the construction business, that items 1 through 8, my crew could do that in one day, all of them, with probably an extra long lunch in between.
I don't have dollar numbers, but I don't think there's anything major here. Moving on to the mechanical, plumbing, and so on. I mean, I think the pertinent comments in the 3rd paragraph, all equipment is very new, seem to have been installed recently, et cetera. Life expectancy, everything is in very good condition. There's a couple of things. And you got to remember, too, now, for those of you that haven't been in this building's been standing empty. Whenever you go into vacant buildings, and this goes for both these buildings, that it's been a vacant building. It's been through a winter now without people in there, and so there are little things that are going on. For example, when he talks about there's an odor under one of the sink. Well, the sinks and the plumbing hasn't been used. It's been a vacant building. There's a reason why we're buying this building at a discounted price, and it's not just the current market conditions, I think.
Water is just evaporated in the C&P traps.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay. You want to go through this in more detail? You want to move on to other items? What's your pleasure?
I'd like to move on. I believe that Mr. Paulson has done an extremely good job noting every single detail down to burned out bulbs, but there's nothing major to talk about here.
Nothing major, so you have a cost idea of what all these things are gonna run?
Most of these things I do, yeah.
Okay, well, maybe
It's
you could
nothing
share
major.
with us a dollar figure. I
Well, I
mean,
don't have
that's
a
all I'm
total.
looking for, Scott.
Well, obviously, Laura, I don't have a total dollar figure for this at this moment, but I have read every word on these pages, and it's mostly routine maintenance, routine repair. A lot of stuff, page one, is mostly if you got some vinyl spackle, you've taken care of all except the door. And a new door will not cost you more than $200.
You authorized at our last meeting up to $10,000 to be spent. I think on the survey was 2,500. This work, I believe, was around that same amount. There's probably about $4,000 left in the budget that you authorized to be spent through December 15th. I wasn't sure it was good use of the money to go out and actually spend money to have detailed estimates on these things, but if you'd like, we can.
I guess I'd like someone to say these are probably the top $3 items and get an idea of how much they're going to cost. If they're things we're not going to fix and we don't care about, then don't spend anything. But if there are key mechanical issues or issues with the security system, we ought to know what it's going to cost to fix them. So I'm saying prioritize, have someone decide what the top $3 or $5 items might be and get a figure for it.
Okay.
If it's minimal, then we can all sleep better.
Yes, sir.
Well, I just think, I agree to a point on the major ones, but I wouldn't hold us back from making a decision tonight. Nor, most of it looks like it could be done in-house. So,
Well, there's staining on the outside of the brick. I mean, people that have walked by have definitely seen that staining. And the suggestion is that ought to be pressure washed and clean. I've lost my place in my pile of paper. Where is that part, Scott? You've read every word.
it's rustic.
Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not the least bit concerned about staining on the outside of the building. Not at
Actually,
all.
the one part that I think that we would look at after if we were to buy the building, is there are some comfort decisions to be made as to where you put electrical switches, and especially the new panel board for circuit breakers. You may wish to, depending on your use of the building after you've decided how it's all going to shake out, you may want to move those panel boards. And depending on how far you want to move them, and surge suppression would be very important. The great thing is that generator, which is very valuable, I believe. But Mr. Paulson's absolutely correct. You know, change the oil in the oil filter and do the regular maintenance you would do on your lawnmower, for crying out loud.
But they weren't even allowed to test the generator. I mean, it should be tested. If it's important, we should know if it's working.
I'm sure it works. I don't think Excel would sit around with a generator that doesn't work. Say, we're the power company, you know. But I would say electrical is the one thing, and that's a comfort decision. You know, the electricity works, it just depends on how do you want to have control over it, given the future use of the building. And that's why you want to move those circuit panels.
I may be the only one concerned about this, so I don't want to.
No, I said I
I don't
was.
think so.
But we can still move forward and we can delve into those problems as this process moves along.
Chuck's approaching the microphone.
Well, I just wanted to mention too that, well, Bruce did mention this is a very good building, and he saw no real red flags that he, in his opinion, would stop you from, or make you pause as far as the purchase of these buildings. The three people that went out here and did each one of these sections, you know, some of that could probably just a conversation with the structural person doing talking directly with the electrical person, I think would give you a comfort level on what they observed. But there didn't seem to be anything catastrophic based on their observations and the day they were out there looking at it.
So could we phrase that as no major problems?
Yeah, They didn't observe any.
So could we put a dollar figure on the maximum amount we'd spend to repair all those
Not right now.
problems?
Not at this minute.
Well, I think it's a fair question you're asking, and I'm here tonight to tell you that the information isn't perfect here, and I've been warning people that you may be faced with making a decision here without having perfect information about how this is all gonna work out. And, but I think we can try to put numbers to what this report shows, if you want. You know, there in the 2nd Street building, which is the older building by far of the two, there's some comments in here about how you might want to redo electrical panels and things like that. And, you know, obviously, you might want to redo that. You might choose not to. If we were to go in our current 911 4th Street building and make an exhaustive list like this of things that we might want to do to that building, you know, there is really no end to that kind of thing. So the question is, can you move into it and live in it the way it is? I think honestly, we wouldn't even have to clean the outside of the brick to move into it. You don't have to do that tuck pointing and recocking on those bricks right away. But there will be ongoing maintenance on that building, just like there is on all our other buildings.
Okay. So whatever we absolutely need to do to move in that's on this list, I mean, things that the inspectors wouldn't feel comfortable with having us move in without doing, that's all I care about. And if the answer is none of these things have to be done right away, then that's what I want to know. I'm not
Chuck?
trying to make work,
No, would
I'm
you
just
just
trying to
want
get answers.
Didn't you just say that? Chuck,
you
do any of these things need to be done immediately?
I didn't ask specifically that question, but no, there was no like real red flags.
Like the cost of doing anything at 911 and downstairs for the police department sure would way outweigh this list.
The other part to this is, you remember what the goal here is, not for this to be long-term.
No, but it needs to be workable for now.
I mean, Excel used it as an office building with staining on the brick and didn't choose to fix it, and that was before they knew they were going to be vacating it. I mean, there's deferred maintenance going on in buildings of this size everywhere all the time due to budget constraints.
I think we asked for this, for that specific reason, to find out what, were there any concerns, was there anything that stood out? And I think we're just asking for additional information in regard to what was presented.
Okay?
And I guess, you know, not testing the generator, or was it because it didn't have oil in it, or because it, you know, what was the reasoning behind why we didn't test the generator? And some of those, and maybe it's not a big deal, but those are the kinds of questions, when that's in this document, that leads to another question. And I think, you know, that's actually why we moved this forward, right? If we didn't have concerns, we wouldn't have had it inspected. We would have signed it and been done. But I think that really was what we wanted.
If the sense is that you would like more information and you'd like to bring this back, then the next thing that will be required will be for us to set a meeting date between now and the 15th. That means it could be tomorrow, Tuesday, so on through the days of the week until the following Tuesday. But by that Tuesday morning, we'll be at risk of losing our earnest money, the down payment money of $100,000 if we don't make a decision. So then I need to be ready to formally notify them that we're not going forward by that date. So in order to have another meeting, we need to have a quorum of you come together
Can we try to
over.
put Chuck on the spot for a minute?
Yeah, if you want.
I mean, looking at the things that stood out from you here, can you just give us a number? Is this $2,000 worth of work or $30,000 worth of work? The things that you felt really had to be done.
Well, no, I want to protect Chuck a little bit because even though it's his firm, this was a completely different group And so he's already stepping up to the plate, but Chuck,
Put him on the line.
he just threw a pitch now, take a swing.
Well, you can choose not to swing, too.
Yeah, you know, I didn't go through this in detail. I just looked at those first couple of 8 items, and, you know, I concur with Councilor O'Malley that, you know, it's about a day's worth of work. You know, but I didn't go through the rest of it, and, yeah, there are some unknowns about the generator that, you know, I haven't physically looked at that generator, but I've seen some generators that are $80,000 generators, and, you know, I don't know if this is a $30,000 or what this is, piece of equipment. But again, you know, the real question that I asked Bruce was, is there anything the real red flags? And he didn't really appear to have any. So, I mean, I would be just making a real wild guess at the costs of to fix all of these items, and, you know, and at this point, I'm not prepared to say here are the 3 to 5 things that are the most critical on the list.
It was worth a swing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not suggesting we stop discussion, or, you know, if there's full agreement from everyone to move forward, we can still just come back, get an idea of what those numbers are, and,
Well,
I mean, I didn't mean to stifle discussion. I feel like that's
Well,
what's happening.
that's what we're here for. I mean, it's a question of how much money you're gonna put into this ahead of time. In the studying, like, for example, on the generator, I mean, their suggestion was, there's no reason to think that generator doesn't work. That's the first thing. I mean, it's relatively new. It's a whole lot newer than our generator for this building. I mean,
And it
which is
works.
World War, I don't know what kind of surplus, but, you know, we hauled that thing out. It had never been tested here. And last year, I scheduled a day when we would bring it over here and pretend that the power went out, and we'd power up this building. It was the first time it had ever been done. And it's a process. You gotta figure out what does it run, and you're flipping switches and so on. And that's the process that needs to be done over there. But what his recommendation was that it should be tested and the equipment it serves should be verified during the remodel. You know,
Actually, it says automatic transfer switch. That means that should happen just like that.
that's how they all work.
Yeah. Don't even have to haul it out. Or put
no, not like ours, but ours we have to haul out.
Yeah. Ours operates until the Pollution Control Agency sees it, and then it won't work.
Is there a way to consider approval, and then if 1 or 2 people wanted to continue further discussions with the experts, and then worst case, call an emergency meeting?
Well, if we turn this into a smorgasbord of potential building improvements to be done and put prices on each of them, then still the question would be, okay, which of them would you do? But at least you'd be able to add it all up and say, even if we decided right now, I think that's kind of what you're getting at is, well, how much would it cost to take care of everything that's wrong over there, every light bulb that's out, and every crack in the drywall?
No, actually, the question I'm asking is, what's the minimum
Big
amount
things.
we have to spend to move in and feel comfortable with the security system, and that's all. I'm not saying what's the maximum amount, because I don't think we want to fill all the cracks.
Let me address that security system issue one more time and from a different angle. As we were negotiating over there, it became apparent to us that there's quite a bit of electronic equipment over there that we may be able to utilize, but it's going to be hard to know. There's a phone system that's frankly bigger than our needs, but we're going to own it. And we're not sure right now, and you saw in Mike's memo, we may be better off to just buy a system that ties into City Hall and integrate these two and sell off that system that's there. And the same thing with the security system. You know, electronics are improving all the time. So the question of whether you can just reprogram and retrofit what's over there, we don't honestly know. I mean, Marty's talked with people. I've heard numbers anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 to have an electronic access system. And, you know, we had a budget request from Public Works this year for, what was it, Tom? $12,000 for one building just to do this on a couple of doors. The numbers range all over. If you took it that the security system doesn't work, then it's got, and can't be redone for our needs, then Marty's already planning that we may have to put in a new one, and the number he got was more like, $10,000 to $20,000 for that. That might be an important part of his budget for changing that building, is in doing that security system over again. I'm not sure that in a week we can have somebody come in and say, oh yeah, do this and this to that thing, and it's going to work for you. I mean, we can try.
Where are we at?
Well, we're in a free-form discussion over these items that, I mean, do you have more questions about how we'd pay for it?
No.
Do you have questions about operating expenses? Well, Lori does in maintenance expense, I think. And, right? I mean,
Right, the maintenance expense that I would have in here are just general operating maintenance that
Right.
we've always had and we would probably have over there. They aren't specific to buying the building.
Which agenda item are we on right now?
well,
'Cause
we're
we've
back
been
up
kind of
to.
bouncing around.
Yeah, we have been. We voted on resolution, so E is done. We didn't?
No, we did not.
Okay, we didn't.
F
You're
is
right.
done.
I will at this time.
We voted on F. So you can go back to any one of these, but I announced C, consider authorization. That's kind of the big one. The others tie into it, if you will.
Well, we could either do C or E first,
Agreed.
I'm gonna move to suspend the rules on agenda item E, so that we can decide whether or not we want to cough up the dough.
Okay?
So
So
we
there's
need
a
to
motion to suspend the rules towards adoption of resolution 1909.
Second.
There's a second. Discussion on the motion.
So this resolution just says how we would pay for it if we go ahead and execute
It
it.
doesn't say we're laying out the money, but
Yeah, it says how
how
we
it
do it.
would be done.
And this motion actually just suspends the rules rather than having a first reading on how you pay for it. Other discussion? Roll call vote?
Roll call?
Yes.
Bernard?
Yes.
Birchall?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Morset?
Yes.
Wyland?
Yes.
Motion passes. The rules are suspended towards adoption of 19-09.
Move to adopt 19-09.
There's a motion to adopt 1909.
Second.
There's a second. There's a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Resolution 1909 is adopted.
Move to authorize the appropriate personnel to execute the documents for the purchase of property at 700 First Street and 701 Second Street.
There's a motion to authorize
Second.
purchase. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
One comment, it needs to be conditional on execution of the
Lease.
library lease.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're correct. We mentioned that earlier. I will amend my motion to reflect Catherine's statement.
I'll second the amended motion.
Okay. Other discussion. Pam?
I guess I go back to the maintenance issue and the concerns about that, and if there's any, if we are going to pursue that, to get an estimate on what kind of dollar figure we're talking about. We had concerns, or there was a big gap between what the estimate Marty had, and, it was 200 to 350,000. There was a gap there, and that's what has me concerned here, is how much of a gap will we experience? And that's all I'm gonna say about it, is that, we just don't have that list defined. We think we know, but again, it's fuzzy, and just based on where we're at with dollars, and we're talking about being as precise in some cases as we can be, and this one just doesn't seem to have that emphasis behind it. And again, that's my only concern about this piece of it, is not having a better feel for what might be in that document that's not defined for us.
I hear what you're saying, Pam. I'd like to ask a question of Catherine. Catherine, the purchase agreement, which we saw a long time ago, and frankly, I don't remember, does it allow us to put a condition such as, and this is only kind of hypothetical. But to me, the most important thing is that we maintain power to that building, because if we do have, even for a short period of time, some citizen in for interviewing and the power goes out, I mean, the chances of those coincidences are very, very small. But I want power to be maintained to that building, and that would mean that our ultimate purchase, our closing, would depend upon the condition of that generator working. Does our purchase agreement allow
December
that?
16th is a drop dead date.
Okay.
You say if you're not gonna proceed with the purchase, you gotta notify them by December 16th.
Then there is no condition, yeah.
And the other, I should have brought up, we're working on a couple title exceptions. I don't foresee there being any problem, but I haven't received confirmation back from their property person on them executing the proper documents. So your motions should
Stand the way it is.
state that, well, that it's also subject to any title problems that
Okay.
we can't live with. I think they'll be worked out.
I'll
but-
revise the motion again to include your comments.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Would it make sense to amend the motion to say that the generator's tested within the next 3 or 4 days? That way
Well-
we got at least that piece off the table for the concerns.
If you don't wanna buy this building until the generator's tested, I'm fairly certain they'll get somebody over here.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I was about to agree with Lee that we add that as a condition to this motion. I will add that now, that confirmation that the generator works.
So if we don't have it by the 14th, the whole deal falls apart, we're willing to risk that, whether this generator works or not?
Well, I would say that's their problem.
Well,
No, I
under
think
the
it's our
purchase
problem.
agreement, just so you know, and they've
You'd have
been
to-
very.
You have to say no.
Stick very
clear.
Yes.
that we
Yeah.
pay all costs and we do our own due diligence. I mean, that's what the purchase agreement
Well, then-
says.
Our price is an as-is price,
Yep.
and if you don't like something about it, there's no recourse except to just say no. That was the deal.
Okay, and that ends the condition.
So your motion is,
The motion is that we authorize Mayor and I think Devin to execute the document to purchase the 2 buildings and the parking lot in between, the parcel of land owned by Excel, subject to the conditions mentioned by Catherine. Their title,
Yeah, unresolvable
issues.
title objections and the joint library lease.
right.
Which is
Okay,
item
so that's 2 conditions.
Yeah, but there are conditions, we're not putting
Yeah,
them upon
right.
Excel.
No, they're granting authorization to execute documents contingent on those things being.
Yeah, you have to have the lease, and there's just these title issues out there that have not been resolved yet. I expect them to be resolved, but they have not been yet.
All right. Discussion on the motion?
Well, I wanted to have a little discussion about some of the comments that were made at the public hearing, because we're talking a lot about the logistics of the building, and I think we're sort of maybe glossing over some of the public input, of which I've received some, both positive and negative. In regard to the fact that we had a referendum and voters said no, it's not entirely true, because city voters said they were interested in purchasing the building. Correct? That one passed. They just said they weren't interested in the cost of operating it. If we were to go to referendum, very hypothetically, it's a city purchase, so it would only be a city-wide referendum, right? We could ask voters, would you rather have us purchase this NMC building as a temporary solution and down the road build a new public safety building? Or, as some people have said, they'd like to see us forego this step and just put our funds toward a new public safety building. I bring that up only to state that, folks in surrounding municipalities wouldn't necessarily have a say in that particular referendum question. The part they might have a say in is whether the library board should go ahead and sign a new lease. I'm not sure that's something the library board has to go to voters for. They could be leasing the NMC building, they could be leasing a different building at this point. But voters do have a chance to go to their library board members. And they would have had a chance prior to them meeting to discuss this. In some cases, they're elected officials serving on the library board. And in some cases, they're not. But in any case, voters could have gone to those library board members to have their voices heard. We heard concern about the library board's ability to afford this. And, you know, I think it needs to be made really clear to the public, there's no guarantee that the library is going to be able to, library board is going to be able to purchase this building in 5 years. They may struggle to be a tenant of this building, we don't know. But the onus is going to be on the library board to run their operation, to, you know, be open a sufficient number of hours for the public. One person mentioned, you know, there's no funding in there for additional books. So when we hear we need more books, we need more videotapes, you know, that money's not there. So it's going to be tight, I think, for the library, and we need to just acknowledge that. And if by the time the city's ready to leave that building and build a new public safety building, if the library is not in a position to buy it, that doesn't mean that the city can't sell the building with potentially the library as a tenant. I just think we have to talk about some of these things and make the public aware we haven't not thought about them, but that there's some real possibilities down the road. It's not necessarily all going to fall into place like we think we'd like it to. So I'm done talking.
Just as a comment, I think, if I remember correctly, there's about $80,000, between $60,000 and $80,000 a year for new books each year. And I don't believe we've got that. Do you remember the number, Scott? Was that about right?
Yes, you are, I think you're right, yes.
So
it was 80 in a recent year, and that's actually significantly more than many of our libraries of similar size or nearby, including, I believe, River Falls. And continue.
That assumption is false.
So, you know, we're not ignoring, as a member of the library board, we're doing the best we can with what the money we have, but we're not, I think, we won't be able to buy books. I don't know if that's necessarily a correct statement.
Well, Alan, I think if I may add to Alan's statement, as a former member of the library board, the reason why the library maintains the collection it has is because there's no more room. They buy new books every year, and they get rid of old books because there's no room for them. And that would no longer need to be the policy. But that's up for the library board to decide.
I think you're right, but there is the bigger question. I mean, you can spend your money. Most things in government, it's primarily personnel. In the case of the library, you'd say, well, but the building is a huge expense. Well, it hasn't been, because we've provided them that building for $60,000 a year. I mean, they pay $5,000 a month, includes all the heat and light and everything.
And cleaning.
And the cleaning and janitor and everything. It hasn't been a big expense for them. It's a huge expense for other libraries. And frankly, the statistical reporting on libraries, you know, I've had my quibbles with it. Because we provide the janitor for the library here, and most libraries count that as a library employee, and so they're better staffed than we are. Well, ours is kind of under the radar, and will continue to be under the radar. So there's this apples and oranges thing, but are we deficient in volumes? For the population we're serving, they've been trying hard for a long time. My library has recognized we need to buy more books. But at the same time, you look at those statistics, we're culling, taking out the old and less often circulated books. We're culling at a very aggressive rate in order to maintain a very current but smaller collection that gets circs, because they're after circulation.
What was the number? I mean, you're always seeing book sales up there, but how many books do they sell off or get rid of every year? Anybody know? Seems like a lot of them.
Well,
Or $80,000 worth?
That includes the
see, a lot of those,
Donations.
that's mingled in. There's a lot of books that are sold that are purchased by the Friends of the Library for sale to give the money to the library.
Oh, okay,
So those aren't necessarily culled volumes from the library.
okay.
Well, I'd like to, I guess, address some of those comments too. And here's probably the biggest one, is I think it was stated a couple of times, well, were they lying, then, or are they lying now? Well, the plan that went to referendum last year, the $10 million plan, has really only one thing in common with this plan, the address. Other than that, it really has nothing in common. I mean, that was a plan to go from their 10 to 12,000 square feet, currently to 40,000 square feet. It was a plan to correct the deficiencies in the collection by spending something like $500,000 fell swoop on collection, not $80,000 a year. Boom. It had over $500,000 in buying new furniture. It had remodeling the entire building, including the underground garage, to make that into public meeting spaces. It was a one-time fell swoop, let's fix all the problems with the library, let's give them a brand new location, let's fix their space problems, let's increase their budget, we'll double their annual operating budget, we're going to hire more personnel. We're going to fix every problem with the library right now. And honestly, the voters had sticker shock with that plan. This plan isn't anything like that. I'm not going to tell you that this plan solves all the problems of the library. In fact, I challenged the library board to very closely look at whether they could afford even the increase going from $60-some thousand a year, $65,000 a year, to $120,000 a year, a $55,000 increase, which amounts to about $2 per year per capita for the population being served. So is there an increased operating cost? Yeah, it's $2 per capita. Where will they make it up? Well, right now, I don't know. They're probably going to use that reserve that they've got, and after that, they're going to have to cut something, and you may be right. They may be cutting the rate that they raise by new books, or they may be looking for other new funding sources. I continually hear about River Falls, and my answer is there's two main differences. The community of River Falls came through big time and helped raise private dollars to build a new library. I've yet to see anything where Hudson can't do that when they set their mind to raise those dollars. I think that can be done. The second thing is River Falls gets buku state dollars every year. You've heard my refrain about it, but they get $2.3 million, same size community as we are, and we're going to get $180,000 from the state this year. And you know what? That lets you do things like support a library where we have to pay the freight ourselves. We've come up with a fantastic way to share collaboratively with our other municipalities. Any one of them, and we had a couple of people here from other municipalities that spoke tonight, and I was glad they were here. If you got the impression that the joint library is somehow costing money, on the contrary, their boards, the village board, has complete veto power over increases. I tell you what, the people that are out paying the county library tax rather than paying into our joint library are going to find out that they have no control, and they're going to pay more next year. They could drop out of this joint library any time, and their taxes for library support would immediately go up. And that's not up over our current location, that's up over this plan. This plan will provide library service for lower cost than it would if they all dropped out and went back into that county library plan. This is a pretty efficiently run library that we've got, and it'll have to be continuing to be efficiently run because there's not going to be any extra money for them. So what's different is this. Were they lying then or lying now? That's a bogus question, because they were talking about fixing all the problems then, and it was going to cost a lot of money. What problem are we fixing now? Are we fixing personnel? No. Are we fixing the collection? No. We're fixing their space problem. And we're getting them into a space that they feel good enough about staying long term that they're willing to spend the impact fee money to remodel it because they'd love to stay there long term. That's the problem we're fixing. It's not a do-all, catch-all, fix-all, everything for the library. Quite a bit from it. The library is still going to have big challenges. I hope the community rallies to support the library. I mean, this is one step to make that happen, but it's only one step. And the onus is going to be on them. And yeah, we're taking a big leap of faith. I mean, here's a $3 million deal, and you're not going to have everything. You're not going to know everything, and there may be $30,000 worth of this and that to be done in there, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was. And so it's difficult, but I tell you, we all are elected officials. We're as accountable as there is in government right here. I mean, we are accountable for doing this, and I know you've all given this a lot of thought. I honestly believe if we took this deal to referendum with city taxpayers, if they liked the plan before, I honestly think they're going to like this plan a lot better, because the thing that hasn't had as much conversation tonight is what it's doing for the police. And then it's going to about double the space we've got for EMS. It's solving our space problem in a way that I don't see happening in 5 years without this deal. In fact, I think the police will stay right where they are for 5 years if this deal doesn't happen, because I don't see us building a new public safety building anytime soon. In this economy, without further growth in the city, more construction, a different economic climate, I just don't think that's going to happen. So if you care about improving the space for the police department, that's something this is going to accomplish, and I think we're going to do it on a bargain budget. I can't imagine us going anywhere else that we could walk in and do as little remodeling, and I looked at a lot of different buildings before bringing you this idea, and I'll tell you what, there would have been a lot more remodeling than this in most of those buildings in order to make it suitable space for the police department. So I think that comment particularly kind of galled me about were they lying then. Well, it's a completely different plan. The other part about the, why isn't there a referendum? The reason there isn't a referendum is there isn't a tax increase. End of story. So what do you want to do? You got other discussion, you got a motion on the table. If you intend to vote no, the next thing will be to schedule another meeting, I think.
Ask the question.
Ready for the question? Roll call vote.
Bernard?
Yes.
Burchill?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Brokaw?
Yes.
Wyland?
Yes.
Morset?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. And that moves us down to number G, which is to consider an amendment. Oh, I'm sorry. Number D, request of Badger Housing Associates 6 LLC to release part of the drainage and utility easement between lots 24 and 25, St. Croix Business Park, First Edition, to allow the easterly expansion of the state office building.
Mayor Knutsen's explanation is pretty clear. This is to accommodate proposed addition to the state office building in St. Croix Business Park. Badger Housing owns Lot 25, which is a lot the state office building on, and Lot 24, which is the lot to the east. The expansion and parking would encumber the drainage utility easement between the two lots. I'm recommending to accommodate that proposed expansion that we release the drainage and utility easement between the two lots, except for the north 10 feet and the south 10 feet of the utility easement. The release has been prepared by a corporate counsel for the developer, was based on a release prepared by City Attorney Catherine McKittrick a couple of years ago. I provided the legal description, and then attached is an exhibit showing where that released easement is located at. I would ask that we'd only proceed with this release if that building project actually moves ahead. If it doesn't, then they would want to sell the lot, and we would want to retain that easement, so it'd be subject to that consideration.
Denny, I'd like to move to approve the signing of this release as drafted, with the condition that the project be implemented, or that we have sufficient sign that the project is going to actually move forward at the time that we sign this release.
Yeah, you wouldn't sign it if it's not going
Right.
forward.
Absolutely.
Second?
Any motion and second? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries, and the request is approved. Okay, now I think we're on G, consider an amendment to the lease agreement with Community Access TV for space in the lower level of the municipal building, 911 4th Street. And the intent of this, it came from the minutes of their meeting that they wanted to ask for this, and so because time is so short, even though I wasn't really further contacted, I had mentioned it to Judy Kelly, the president of that board, that we could do it, and so I put it on the agenda here for you to approve. So it would give them 6 months, even if we sell the building, they couldn't be kicked out until the end of June. It will give them time to find another place to go. That's the intent of this.
Move to approve the addendum to the lease.
Is there a second?
Second.
Alan?
I think, I don't know why we would want to do this to anybody when our intent is to sell that building. And whoever gets in there, it can be a plus or a minus, let them negotiate a lease if they want to. But if we have someone that wants to use that building to rehab it or do something, I don't think, there's lots of space available in town.
Well, may I address that?
Sure.
Two points. One is that Youth Action already has a lease there to the end of June, so the building's encumbered no matter what. And really, this is a way of saving our own cable board a big chunk of money. They're a head end for our cable system, and to try to move all the buried cable while the ground is frozen, the estimate from the contractor is at least an additional $7,000 to move to any other building, to dig up all that, because you're gonna have to heat the ground, and you're gonna have to use other equipment to move that stuff when the ground is frozen. And by the end of April, we won't have that problem, or certainly by the first part of May, depending on the winter. And then it can all be, all excavation can be done at a savings. That's really the reason for it.
Well, basically, the city's gonna take the loss then, instead of the cable company.
No, the cable board has its own budget, and remember, it's North Hudson and Hudson.
Sure.
Cable.
Right,
So-
but they're their separate entity, and you're asking the city of Hudson to take the loss on this. If we can't sell the building, or we have to continue to support that building for the next 6 months with our heating and the cooling, which we wouldn't have to do, we may be able to shut that building down, close it down, we wouldn't have any expenses.
What would you do with Youth Action then?
We'll buy out the lease at $300 a month for 6 months, it's $1,800.
I think we're gonna own a spot, we could move Youth Action
Yes.
pretty quick.
Okay, I don't think we're gonna kick Youth Action out on the street.
No, we have a spot to move it to.
It may be to both of our benefits to have them move early.
Yeah. But that's where I'm coming from, is I think that, I don't see any advantage for us to do this.
You wanna make it a 3-month instead of a 6-month?
I mean, I think if we don't have anything going on, I'm happy to leave them there. But if we have someone that comes in that short period of time, then I don't think we should tie ourselves up with it. They can stay there as long as we've got that building open.
Well,
You can still sell the building with
Sure.
them in it. though.
if I haven't been clear, the entire intent of this is to protect them under new ownership, to give them at least a few months under new ownership in order to complete their transition, rather than get a 30-day notice right away, which
But
they may or
I
may
would-
not get.
Because I would expect too, if they were gonna move, this isn't a 30-day process. They're gonna need a couple of months of planning to move all those cables and everything else they need to move.
I mean, they're gonna be off the air if they get a 30-day notice. There's no question about that.
Are they interested in staying there long-term?
No.
Okay. So
No.
if someone else were to buy
No,
it, they don't want to be a...
Well, we've been very actively looking at other
Got it.
locations and have got a pretty decent one in mind already. But that's down the road, to negotiate that.
But I think Alan's point is that, are we preventing the building from selling because we have a tenant that's stuck in there and they may not, that's your concern, right?
Or not necessarily selling or closing the building up to reduce expenses on the building, heating and cooling and having
Why
a
are we
tenant.
giving the library to move out, though?
Well, the library's not gonna be moved out till April anyway.
So it might be okay if we go June.
Okay, well, here we are. We've got a little disagreement, but we can vote on it anyway unless you've got a suggested amendment here. I mean, to give you, here's the costs for, this is for 2010 through the first 6 months.
Correct.
60 grand.
And this is assuming that
Everybody's in there the full 6 months.
all our tenants are in there, it's $60,000, and if we left, if the library stayed that whole time and continued to pay their rent until
June 30th.
June,
This assumes
paid
the
their
library's
June
in there till
rent,
June, correct.
we'd break even. I mean, your point is valid, Alan, but it's a $60,000 deal to run that place for that amount of time. So it, you know, it's
Is there,
$1,000 a month. Every month that you could change that, it's,
Well, but the image that the building will be empty January 1st, or shortly thereafter, is just, that's just not gonna happen.
no.
The library's gonna be there till spring at the earliest, in our discussions, the earliest they could move everything is sometime in April.
I think, I mean, not to quibble with you, but I think you answered pretty quickly that they're not interested in staying long-term. They have other more preferable places to go if they could work it out, but I honestly think this is pretty workable space for them, considering there's no moving costs. A new owner of that building may choose to negotiate with them and have them stay.
Yeah,
That's a possibility.
sure.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No.
Raise your hands. Yes, raise your hand. 4-2, okay. Motion carries. All right, let's get moving. We'll pick up the pace here. Reports of city officials. What do we got? Any alderperson communications and items for future agendas?
Would like us to, at some time, discuss the proposition of parking downtown and what parking spaces are worth. We just agreed this evening to buy 51 parking spaces at less than $4,000 each, which is a tremendous steal. And that's a really good deal for the city. Average price is about $9,000 for a surface spot. And if our parking utility, Catherine's about to tell me to shut up because I'll be discussing something. So, Catherine?
Put it on.
Put it on the
Just put it on
agenda,
the agenda.
please.
I will.
Along with the parking lot across the street here that nobody parks in.
And that's on public safety for this month. so.
I think we'll do that.
Parkson?
Oh, it's empty.
Too far to walk?
You gotta have a permit.
I'm being facetious. Yeah.
Oh, during the day. We're all ahead.
You two have any other items?
No.
Lee? Randy?
No.
No. City attorney?
No.
City administrator?
No.
Okay. We're ready to adjourn, but I did put on a potential closed session. Would you like, I know it's gotten late. The challenge we have is I don't want to let grass grow under our feet. If we're actually going forward here, then we need to have some talks about, and we've talked somewhat in open session. What I'd like to talk with you about in closed would be our strategy for how we'd go about finding a new owner for that building. If you agree that we should talk about that in closed session, it would be appropriate to make a motion to do that. If you want to wait and do it at another time, we can do it at another time.
Move to go into closed session.
There's a motion to go into closed session. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion?
I think it's premature. I think we could do that once the deal is done.
Question.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Roll call.
Morset?
Yes.
Bernard?
no.
Wyland?
No?
Burchell?
Yes?
Brokaw?
No.
O'Malley?
No.
Okay, we're,
Adjourn.
there's a motion to adjourn. Second?
Me and
All in
Al.
favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no.
I think you guys ought to go out and have a beer.
Yeah, I think so.
Me and Al will stay and talk with you.
Al, you